The storm gathered like a bruise over the battered keep of Winterfell, its clouds swollen with thunder and a taste of cold iron on the air. Bran Stark felt it before any sentinel called warning, felt it in the marrow of his bones, in the ancient heart trees that connected root to root beneath the snows of the north, and in the long-dead whispers carried on the weirwood's scarlet leaves. Ravens shrieked overhead in a frenzy, black wings beating at the sky as if they could slap the looming darkness back across the narrow sea. He sat cloaked in furs upon a wooden dais in the godswood, Hodor's steady presence lingering behind him, even years after Hodor had been laid to rest. The winter town had grown quiet since the long night, but this hush tasted different, copper-sharp and hot. The ravens spoke in overlapping caws until their voices were an impossible braid. Bran's sight rushed outward, through 1,000 eyes, until he perched high in the frigid sky. From that impossible vantage he watched the coasts of Westeros and the black waters between. Far across the stepstone islands of the narrow sea, a rolling wall of soot and fire slid toward the world like a hungry tide. It was the doom reborn. Not the Dragon Lord's fall of 4 centuries past, but its delayed echo, a final surge of volcanic wrath, triggered deep in Valeria's shattered spine. The first doom had shattered the empire of old, but its aftershocks had never fully subsided. Now, the sea itself boiled. Pillars of flame reached skyward as if seeking to claw the stars, and the ashes of a continent rose on poisonous winds. If those winds reached Westeros, every forest would kindle, every lung would sear, and the last greens of the world would be choked under a winter of cinders. "Stop it," Bran whispered to the storm, to the darkness, to the old powers that answered to no king. "Stop it." But wind and flame heed no pleas. They ride only currents and fault lines, obeying the secret language of stone. In the depths of his mind, the three-eyed raven, now only a hushed echo of its own passing, answered him. They burned dragonfire to break their own chains, and their chains were the world. The last link will snap where men once escaped by sea. The last link must be mended. Bran's pulse shivered. The last link, Dragonstone. Long ago, Valyrian refugees had fled their homeland and anchored their culture on the fiery isle off Westeros' eastern coast. In Dragonstone's basalt halls, those survivors had stored secrets of the 14 flames, secrets of glass candles and blood sorcery. The glass candles still burned there, even after Aegon's conquest and the civil wars that followed. Through those candles, Valyrian mages could bend sight and thought across oceans. And now, that same residual sorcery knotted Westeros to Valyria like a fouled line on a sinking ship. Bran unspooled his consciousness along invisible threads, slipping past the crumbling ramparts of Winterfell, past the wind-swept heights of the Eyrie, past the treacherous waves that broke around Storm's End, until he reached the towering stone dragons that guarded Dragonstone's bridge. Every rough scale in that carved stone radiated memory. The ancient fortress slumbered, but the glass candle in its highest chamber guttered in sickly green. Its flame bent inward, as though drinking something from beyond the world's borders. In the windowless rookery below, ravens shifted uneasily. Bran slipped into one bird's eyes, tasting the metal tang of keys and old guano. He saw a hooded keeper, stooped over parchments. Maester Kelvin, once of Old Town, now sworn to Queen Sansa's rule. Bran called the raven to claw the maester's sleeve. The man startled, dropping his quill. Stark seal pressed wax beside Tyrell. Rose on a letter addressed for the north. Dispatches about harvests, troop rotations, mundane worries that would never matter if fire consumed the world. "Look." Bran funneled all urgency he could muster into the raven's caw. Kelvin glanced toward the narrow spiral that climbed to the Tower of Candles. He hesitated. The candle's glow reached like a cat's eye slit under the iron-banded door. The smell of brimstone leaked through stone cracks, though no hearth burned there. At last the maester moved. He seized an oil lantern and ascended, boots echoing hollow. When he reached the locked door, Kelvin pressed his ear against wood. Something whispered, like children hissing over a secret, but the language smelled of dying things. Bran perched in a shadowed beam, watching through raven eyes as Kelvin fitted a key. The lock turned with a groan. The heavy door swung open, and the room beyond bloomed in malefic radiance. The candle's glass column glowed chartreuse, its twisted interior alive with writhing filaments. Faint lines of silver smoke spiraled upward and vanished through a fissure in the ceiling. "Put it out," Bran urged. Yet Maester Kelvin stood frozen, pupils dilated, entranced. Bran launched from the beam, wings pumping. He veered for the candle, but ravens cannot snuff flames. The bird's feathers scorched on the heatless light. Screeching, Bran abandoned the bird before pain broke his warg. Back in Winterfell, Bran's body sagged. Sweat cooled on his brow despite the snow that fell in soft curtains beyond the Godswood wall. He tasted ash on his tongue. "Are you well, Your Grace?" asked a cautious voice. Arya stepped from between snow-heavy branches, her boots silent on the moss. She'd returned from Braavos only 2 moons prior, slipping into Winterfell unannounced, the smile she offered Bran holding both mischief and deep sorrow. She had seen wars break kingdoms, had lost too much to watch another world-ending calamity gather. Bran forced a nod. "No time, Arya. The doom rises again." Her jaw tightened. "Then we kill it. This foe has no heart to pierce. Then give me a path." Bran closed his eyes, letting ravens swirl in darkness. Dragonstone's candle anchored the rising storm. If he could unseat that anchor, extinguish the brittle green fire, perhaps the aftershocks of Valyria's ruination would lose their tether to Westeros' winds. 1,000 years of maesters had debated glass candles, their forging of obsidian and blood. Some said dragons' bones were ground into the glass. Others whispered that mortal souls were fused to the molten mixture. Only Valyrians had known the right. Bran would need the memory of a Valyrian to snuff the flame. Deep below Winterfell, crypts carved in ancient years stretched like ribs in the earth. In one black niche lay Queen Alysanne's dragon-riding daughter, Princess Daenerys Targaryen, scarcely remembered. Bran cast his spirit beneath stone lids, stirring dust that had rested ages. In death's hush, he found no spark. He roamed further through the crypts of Dragonstone, through dragon skulls piled in gloomy alcoves, until he sensed a spark not quite extinguished. A sliver of vision belonging to Baela Targaryen, granddaughter of Daemon, dead these 2 centuries. Baela's last years had been spent within Dragonstone's halls. She had known the tower, the candle, its every sibilant murmur. Bran poured himself along that filament, diving into memories not his own. A woman's voice gasped around him. "Sunset on Blackwater Bay, ashes of my forebears on the wind." Bran grasped images of torchlit passages, candle flames that hissed when dragons soared overhead, and a white-hot fear that the candle itself might one day awake. He saw clasped tome pages inked in Valyrian glyphs. The passage he needed danced like firelight. "Break the mirror, and shadow consume shadow." He withdrew, heart pounding. A simple command. Shatter the candle. Obsidian forged of dragonfire was brittle only in one place, the seam hidden by enchantment. A single blow, strong and true, could burst the glass and free the light to swallow itself. But who could strike that blow while resisting the pillow-soft seduction the candle used to snare minds? Arya stepped closer, snowflakes melting in her dark hair. "I heard your thought," she whispered, though Bran knew she could not truly hear his mind. The siblings had always shared unspoken threads. "Let me be the blade." Bran opened clouded eyes. "You must move faster than the wind. I've danced with death before." She smiled, the gesture thin as a cat's whisker and twice as sharp. "Point me east." The masts of the Wolf's Wing groaned as gale-born waves slammed against its hull. Arya stood at the prow, cloak snapping, face kissed by spray. Beyond the horizon smoked the faintest smear on the sky, Dragonstone's eastern cliffs. The crew, sworn men of House Stark, and a handful of ironborn cell-sails, rowed with silent urgency, each of them having seen storm clouds back home spitting lightning of unnatural hue. In the great cabin, Bran's voice crackled through a polished weirwood bowl set among maps. Bran had entered the Heart Tree in Winterfell, his spirit surfing the ravens that trailed the ship, guiding its course. "The wind turns. You must reach the castle before moonrise," Bran's voice whispered from the bowl. "Else the ash will ride ahead of you." Arya nodded, though no one watched. Her thumb traced the hilt of needle, but such a thin blade could not shatter obsidian. For that, she carried a warhammer. Small and balanced for speed, its head made of dark matte steel forged in Winterfell's own bloomery. Gendry had shaped it for her during a visit to King's Landing, each curve kissed by smith fire and devotion. The hammer now hung across her back. By dusk, Dragonstow's breakers foamed around their hull. The castle itself loomed above in silhouette, dragons carved as buttresses, wings poised for flight. Arya led her small party ashore. 2 silent ironborn climbers, a northern scout named Lesser, and Maester Kelvin himself, whom Bran had convinced to flee the candle's temptation and await them by the beach. Kelvin clutched a narrow-bladed knife more suited for cutting parchment than men, but resolve glinted hard in his eyes. They scaled the switchback path to the postern gate. Snow blew sideways, mingling with ash motes carried by winds too warm. The air smelled like burnt marrow. Every step upward struck sparks of unease. Inside the courtyard, torches guttered greenish, though no jade oil burned. The keep's stable stood empty. Horses had broken free during the candle's lullaby, now only hoofprints in frozen mud. Fingers of black smoke slithered along the ground, pooling near drains like living ink. Kelvin led them through passages none but maesters and stonecarvers walked. The others followed, eyes watering when they passed vents exhaling sour heat. Finally, they stood before the iron-banded door. A song drifted from within, its melody lilting, beckoning. Arya's pupils widened. She shook her head, exhaling. "Not today," she murmured, quoting her long-gone dancing master. She unlimbered the hammer. Kelvin slid the key into the lock. Before he turned it, Bran's voice whispered through a raven perched above the lintel. "Remember, Arya, shadow consumes shadow." The raven hopped once, then lifted into darkness. Kelvin twisted the key. The door swung in with a tortured sigh. Light exploded, a viridescent blossom that painted their faces sickly pale. Inside, the glass candle pulsed on a low pedestal, its inner heart writhing. Threads of green light wove upward, twisting into the ceiling where they vanished toward the clouds. Ash rained gently inside the chamber, as though the candle drew the doom's detritus even across leagues of air. A figure stood before the pedestal, draped in a tattered maester's robe charred at the hem. His silver collar pieces glowed ember red. He turned, revealing eyes filled with green flame. It was Maester Heled, Bran recalled, once assigned to Dragonstow's previous Lord Dache. The man should have died years ago, yet here he stood, sustained by the candle's consuming will. "You trespass on sacred flame," Heled croaked, voice echoing as if 2 tones overlapped. "The world ashes anew, and we stand reborn." Arya slid needle from her belt, holding the rapier-thin blade between her and the resurrected maester. "Step aside." He let out a ragged laugh. "Shadow takes shadow," he intoned, mocking. "You think to steal our words?" Kelvin stepped forward, eyes shining with sorrow. "You were my tutor once. Let me help you." Heled's face cracked in a grotesque smile. "Help me join our mother empire in glory." He raised both hands. Green fire spiraled from his fingers, coiling into serpents of light. They struck the walls, hissing. Stone blackened, weeping molten tears. Arya darted low. She rolled beneath a lashing coil, dashed forward, and slashed Held's arm with needle. Black ichor bled, but the wound smoked shut instantly. Heled swept a hand. A wave of force hammered the chamber. Lesser and the Ironborn crashed against walls. Kelvin stumbled, teeth rattling. Arya skidded, boots screeching. She met Bran's consciousness. A sudden flare of presence. In the raven scope of his vision, he saw lines of power feeding the candle. Silver cords linking the flame to Heled's veins. Bran reached along those cords. He had glimpsed such threads before, when warging dragons and direwolves, but these glowed with fouler energy. He pushed. Heled's body jerked. For a heartbeat the quivering maester fought himself. Snarling with twin voices, He staggered toward the pedestal. Arya seized the moment. She leapt and swung the hammer overhead with every ounce of Braavosi timing and northern fury. The hammer's face connected with the candle's hidden seam. Obsidian shrieked. Cracks spider-webbed, light seeping like blood from fresh cuts. She struck again. The room erupted. An implosion rather than an explosion. The green fire collapsed inward, swallowing itself and dragging air. Loose papers, dust, and helids screaming form into a shrinking sphere, no larger than a child's heartbeat. Then came silence. Darkness surged back with a pop. Arya reeled, ears ringing. The candle lay in shards on the plinth. No glow remained, only a smell of wet stone after rain. Helid's robes lay collapsed, empty. Bran watched through the raven still perched aloft. He felt a coil loosen around his chest. Yet the bigger storm had only begun to shift. The doom's ash cloud still thundered over the sea, but its tether to Westeros was severed. Whether that severance could halt the winds in time remained uncertain. Arya slumped against the wall, breathing hard. "Is it enough?" She whispered to the empty air, hoping Bran heard. Across the narrow sea, 1,000 miles of molten nights lit Valyria's fractured chained. Yet when the candle shattered, the ash cloud's momentum faltered, turning sluggish as if striking an invisible barrier. Bran sensed it stall, but the first edges of soot and ember still drifted west on entrenched currents. They would reach the stepstones by dawn, brush the stormlands by next nightfall. Too soon. In Winterfell, Bran's mind reached further back through time's fabric, seeking knot after knot of memory. He glimpsed children of the forest weaving spells into the earth, creating barriers of song and stone. He saw the black stone walls of old Valyria, their warding glyphs hammered molten. Those glyphs had once kept the 14 flames bound, until the Dragon Lords, arrogant and glutted on might, attempted to siphon the world's fire for themselves. The backlash tore the continent. Bran followed the root memory to its source, a convergence deep beneath the shivering sea, where telluric currents met. If he could reroute the crosswinds there, the ash would be swallowed into the far north, into the white maw of the polar night where no man dwelled. But he was still mortal mind, however steeped in magic. To move an ocean of wind required strength beyond even the three-eyed raven's mantle. So he called the dragons. Rhaegal's green and bronze wings thundered over Winterfell's crooked battlements, where he roosted since Jon Snow's passing. Silver-white Vieira, newly hatched from an egg found in the ruins of Meereen, now grown large enough to bear Queen Sansa on brief flights, screeched in her eyrie. And in Old Town, Maester Samwell had raised a pale gold wormling named Hearthfire that adored the citadel's bells. Bran's summons threaded through their draconic minds, a primal tug older than language. Rise. Ride the upper winds. Dragons were living conduits of heat and storm. As each took wing, Rhaegal from Winterfell, Vieira from Dragonstone skies, Hearthfire from the Reach, they climbed beyond mortal reach, their beating wings stirring stratospheric currents. Bran's sight rode with them. He mapped the jet streams as a weir net of lines, redirecting pockets of force, coaxing them like shepherding dogs around a flock. Rhaegal, eldest and strongest, banked over the sunset sea, inhaling freezing air. Bran urged flame from the dragon's throat, but not dragonfire. Instead, Rhaegal exhaled a burst of superheated vapor, water drawn from his own body, which instantly crystallized in the cold, forming a wall of towering ice clouds. Those clouds birthed a low-pressure trough, an atmospheric sink that Bran anchored with song learned from children of the forest. Soon the trough suction began eating the ash-laden winds, pulling them northwest instead of west. Vieira stitched the southern flank, weaving hot drafts that bent air currents upward, forcing ash higher where Jetstream would whisk it east, back toward the smoking sea. Hearthfire above Old Town threw circles of heat over the Reach, generating counter-cyclonic swirl that nudged weather northward. Bran's mind strained. Each dragon's heart hammered within his own chest, multiple rhythms colliding. His physical body's skin flushed, then cooled to near-death pallor as he teetered on the brink of forgetting himself entirely. But piece by piece, the ash front split, curling away from Westeros' shore. The first sparks of the doom hissed as they met cold wall of Bran's conjured storm, embers snuffed into harmless soot, lost over the open sea. Hours passed like years. Ravens dropped from the sky in exhaustion, and Bran's consciousness leapt from bird to dragon to weirwood in desperate relay. At last, just before dawn cast pink onto Winterfell's towers, the final plume dissipated over the Bay of Seals, falling as harmless gray snow into the waves. On Dragonstone, Arya watched sunrise from a cracked parapet. The horizon still smudged gray, but no plume climbed higher. A faint hiss in the wind was all that remained of doom. She felt an ache in her arms from swinging the hammer, and an odd emptiness where adrenaline had burned clean. Kelvin emerged, cheeks ashen but eyes shining. "The castle is still ours," he said softly, as if testing the words. Arya nodded. "And what of our maesters?" Kelvin shook his head. "Herod's robes were all we found. Perhaps his soul paid for the candle's fire." She turned back to the sea. Better one soul than all souls. A raven dipped low, alighting on the parapet. It carried no scroll. Instead, it met her gaze with Bran's reassurance pulsing behind its black eyes. Arya smiled, a gesture slow and genuine this time. "Tell him I'll be home soon," she whispered. The bird croaked, flapped once, and soared north. In Winterfell's godswood Bran awoke, muscles weeping like he'd climbed the wall. Snow swirled around him, but each flake seemed more real than anything he'd felt since first falling from that tower so long ago. He touched the gnarled roots of the heart tree in silent thanks. Somewhere below, faint warmth fluttered from the crypts, Baela Targaryen's memory slipping back to rest. Soft footsteps approached. Sansa knelt, Winter Queen's cloak pooling scarlet about her. "It's done?" she asked. Bran nodded. "The sky is safe." A shiver of relief raced through her, but duty sharpened her gaze at once. Word must be sent to every holdfast. Harvests, livestock. There will be ash drifts in the Far East for a generation. "I will guide them," Bran said. "The weirwoods will drink the ash, and new seeds will grow clean." She brushed hair from his brow, sisterly, though he seemed far older than she. "When Arya returns, we will feast." The North remembers. Far out across the now quiet narrow sea, the shattered remnants of Valyria collapsed into themselves. With no ember of glass candle on Dragonstone to steady its tremors, the last peaks of the 14 flames slid beneath the smoking sea, sealing ancient horrors in stone tombs. The doom, once a wound laid open to bleed endlessly, scabbed over at last. Beneath winter's stars, Bran looked upon the world through all its eyes. Wolf and raven, dragon and dire ant, child and crone. The threads of history had twisted but not broken. In a quiet corner of the godswood, where Hodor's ghost seemed to stand watch, Bran whispered gratitude to names living and lost. And though there would be further trials, wars and winters, loves and betrayals, this day the world had been spared a grave it never saw opening. Beyond the wall, auroras danced in silent color, born of charged ash now harmless in the high atmosphere. Children of the forest raised their eyes, and for the first time since the Dawn Age, they sang a song not of mourning but of continuation. The song slipped down the face of Westeros, across rivers and ridges, and every heart of man or beast that heard it beat a fraction steadier. Bran Stark, the boy who once dreamed of knights and castles, closed his mortal eyes amid the snow. He felt the tree's roots cradle him like arms. Somewhere, a hammer rang on an anvil in memory, forging iron into futures yet unwritten. In the hush after doom's passing, Westeros inhaled. So began the long breath of life reclaimed. Oh, ah, and ah. Winter's dawn broke slate gray over Winterfell, the rising light filtering through pale cloud banks that still carried a dusting of fine gray powder. Bran felt the air breathe differently. The sky cleansed yet scarred, like frost-new skin over a healed wound. As the chimneys of the castle stirred, sending ribbons of darker smoke into the wan glow, life resumed its familiar clatter. Forges rang, kennels barked, kitchens exhaled steam and the smell of barley bread. But something beneath the clamor vibrated, a taut resonance he alone perceived. The world had swallowed doom's fire, but undigested embers churned in its belly, waiting. In the great hall, Queen Sansa convened an emergency council. She stood at the Mappamonde table, with fingertips on cold hardwood. Auburn hair braided in the northern crown style, salted now with the first harsh strands of silver. Arya, newly returned by fast galley, and still smelling of sea wind, lounged against a pillar, eyes half-hooded yet alert for threats no one else could sense. Maester Samwell of Oldtown attended by glass link in recognition of his studies of occult lore. Tyrion Lannister came on behalf of the southern lords who looked to Winterfell's calm for their own. Other lordlings hovered, Glover, Manderley, Royce, each with a different worry itching under wool. Bran listened from the dais, chair of carved weirwood roots grown smooth beneath his unmoving fingers. Hodor's immense oak seat remained empty beside him in quiet tribute. Yet Bran often imagined the simple wordless reassurance that would have filled it. His eyes, milky with second sight, drifted past the rafters, tracking a raven gliding through stark light outside, feathers dusted with the same silvery ash that fell overnight like ghost snow across the north. Samwell cleared his throat, parchment trembling. Dragons high above managed to draw most particulate east, he said, voice steadier than his hand. But a third of the cloud rode lower. What slipped past Bran's windwall now settles on the Vale and the Crownlands. The ash is sterile, volcanic glass ground fine as flour. It will dim harvest yields unless plowed in with new manure. We must send seed and counsel before sowing begins. Dandero. Tyrion drummed slender fingers against his wine cup. And coin. The Reach vaults hold gold, but old Tarly grudges every stag that does not feed wheat back to his own dominions. To pry his coffers, we need a pledge that ash fields can be rendered fertile again. Sansa shot him a tight smile. Then we pledge Dragonflame. She looked to Bran. My brother proved wind can be bent. He can spare a flicker of fire to fuse glass to soil, just enough to cleanse it. Bran's unfocused gaze sharpened. The dragons answer, but each call costs blood and bone. We will do what is needed. A silence followed. No one doubted he would sacrifice himself if the North demanded. Arya tilted her head. The candle is shattered, yet I feel something tugging. She tapped sternum with gloved fingertips. Like a hook under the ribs, pulling southeast. Bran's breath clouded faintly. I feel it too. The candle was but a gatepost. Beneath Valyria's bones, other doors stand. Slats of grief in a coffin's lid. When the glass burst, echoes fled through those doors. One echo hunts for power enough to fashion a new tether. Then, Samwell's brow furrowed. Can we name it? A shade given life by memory of fire, Bran murmured. A tyrant's afterimage, looking for a vessel of blood and will. His sight drifted inward, sifting through centuries. Some call it the first ember. The ceaseless coal at the core of all Dragonflame sorcery. If it finds flesh, doom begins again. Across the table, Lord Glover muttered oaths. Royce's knuckles whitened on bronze-edged cloak fastenings. Sansa lifted a hand for calm. Where will it seek such flesh? Where fire is half-quenched and hunger reigns, Bran answered. And where old Valyrian blood still flows beneath skin, though thinned by time. He closed his physical eyes. In the weirscape, they flared green. Look to Duskendale. Tyrion arched a brow. The Darkland's old port. Why there? They were no dragon lords. Yet refugees from Valyria's fall nested there in secret. Smelting ore for Blackfire pretenders. Their line persists in forgotten gutters, mixed, resentful, pliant. And near those docks a new smuggler king rises, calling himself Scorched Sun. He gathers sellswords and exiles, with promises of dragon eggs and rivers of obsidian coin. Nam? Sansa glanced to Arya. The younger Stark's eyes glinted, as though each word were a thrown dagger she caught mid-air. You want me to cut him down? Bran shook his head. Blades alone cannot slay an ember. You must steal its hearth before it claims a host. Samwell unrolled a second parchment, charcoal sketch of a cracked sphere. When Dragonstone's candle burst, Maester Kelvin collected fragments. Some shimmer still, refusing to cool. He shipped them north by Raven Lend. If we embed a shard in dragonglass and bind it with Children of the Forest wardings, perhaps we can lure the ember and trap it. Bran's gaze softened on Sam. Ever the scholar. Yes, build a lantern to catch a ghost of flame. But it must be placed where the ember hunts, else it will ignore the bait. Tyrion sipped. So we carry your lantern into Duskendale's underbelly, wave it like a torch in a stable of spilled wildfire, and pray the shadow leaps for it instead of us. A marvelous plan. He sighed theatrically. I shall fetch my smallest cloak. Arya gave a feral grin. Lions and wolves hunting together again. Who carries the lantern? I do, said a new voice. Jon Snow's sister voice. Wait, Jon had passed earlier. But maybe? Wait, we killed Jon earlier. In last part Jon passed. Bran said Rhaegal roosted since Jon's passing. But Jon's voice cannot appear. Let's update. We need dynamic. Maybe young Lady Lyanna Mormont. But she died earlier. Introduce Lord Davos? He could carry. But we can continue. Let's propose Davos Seaworth returns. A voice grizzled with salt and sorrow. Sir Davos Seaworth stepped from behind a column, having arrived overnight. He volunteers. Good. Continue writing. But we must maintain subtlety. Let's continue. Write extended narrative. Infiltration of Duskendale. Political tension. Bran orchestrates remote. Dragons reposition. Ember hunts. Let's craft. Paragraph after council. Davos enters. Plan set. Ship Moondancer sails south with Arya. Davos. Tyrion. Kelvin maybe. Lantern encased in black obsidian. Bran wargs ravens above. At Duskendale. Tyrant scorched sun. Real name Dale Darkland descendant. Fosters cult called Ashen Brotherhood. Obtains partial eggs. Wields wildfire caches. Aims to ignite King's Landing from hidden tunnels beneath Dragon Pit. Action scenes. Infiltration through rain-slick sewers. Cultists wearing black masks. Haunting chant, first ash, last ash. Arya disguised as washerwoman. Tyrion dumps marinade illusions. Davos uses smuggler knowledge. Encounter. Ember reveals as sentient green flame swirling above broken brazier. Leaps into scorched sun's chest. He convulses, pyrokinetic ability emerges. They fight. Lantern trap. Obsidian cage with living weirwood runes. Arya hurls lantern onto villain's torso. Bran remote activates ward using blood tinge from Arya's cut. She slashes her palm on obsidian edge. Trap coruscates, drawing ember out. Villain collapses. But lantern overloaded, would crack. Bran channels through weird network to hold. Risk to his life. Tree roots freeze. Heart tree bleeds red sap. Sansa holds Bran to keep anchored. Weirwood tears freeze to leaves. Bran nearly lost. But Hodor's ghost memory anchor. In Duskendale docks, wildfires ignite. Davos leads Bucket Brigade. Tyrion manipulates sellswords with coin. Glimpses illusions of dragons made of flame rampaging. They escape as tide rises. Lantern sealed. Return to Winterfell. Bury lantern under crypt with children ward. However, a lingering ember impregnates an egg hidden inside Tyrion's satchel. Sets up future. Let's continue story with more details across 6,500 words. We must achieve length. Let's approximate maybe 8,000 tokens. Let's craft about 40 paragraphs of 150 words each. 6,000 words. We'll produce long. Let's write. K-N-D. Tyrion's quip hung in the hall like wine-scented breath on cold air, but before anyone could answer, a measured step echoed through the open door. Sir Davos Seaworth entered, salt-flecked cloak still dripping from the sleet outside. He inclined his head to the queen, then to Bran on the dais, and let his weather-creased gaze sweep the table. Begging your graces, he said, voice carrying the rough courtesy of a man who had scraped barnacles off hulls half his life. If a lantern must be carried into a nest of smugglers, you'll want a smuggler's feet under it. I've run black bays and blind shallows at Duskendale since I had all 10 fingers. The scorched suns men know my face, But they know my debts better. A man can play the fool so long as the tally seems unpaid. A slow smile curved beneath Tyrion's trimmed mustache. Onion Knight turned lantern-bearer. The gods do love symmetry. Sansa's glance flickered from Davos to Bran. Both Stark siblings knew the measure of the man who'd once served Stannis and lost his sons on the Blackwater. In Davos, they read pragmatism and an oathkeeper's spine. Qualities Ashtide could not erode. So be it, Sansa said. Arya leads the shadow work. Tyrion speaks when tongues must bend. Davos guides the sea road. Maester Kelvin tends the lantern. And Bran, I will watch. Bran's voice was distant, yet iron-laced. The roots of every heart tree reach further than men guess. I'll stand at Winterfell and at your shoulders both. Nendowind. The forge yard rang through the night. Winterfell's smiths struck dragon glass into curved panes, no thicker than a thumbnail. Each one oiled with sap, tapped from the weirwood itself. Milky, faintly luminescent when it touched firelight. At the yard's center, a cage took shape. Ribs of black obsidian arched like a spider's legs, all converging around a single fragment of the shattered candle. That shard lay inside a bowl of fused ice and ash, neither melting nor cooling, its glow a subdued gastric green, as though a starved flame gnawed its own bones. The children of the forest had not been seen in the north since the wind wall rose, but when Bran stretched his mind through snow-bent branches, he felt their answers in rustling leaves, in the click of vole claws deep under bark. Before dawn, 3 diminutive figures padded silently into the yard, eyes gold and unblinking. They painted runes on the lantern bars with sap so dark it swallowed torchlight, singing in a tongue thinner than rain. By sunrise they were gone, leaving only footprints that faded before a stable hand could gape. Maester Sam recorded each rune, though he admitted he could translate none. Liken the wardings to a fisher's net, he told Kelvin as they packed, but one cast to catch a creature that never learned to swim and so panics into its own snare. Kelvin merely nodded and added a 3rd layer of oiled silk around the cage. On the 7th day after council, a narrow-beamed galley named Fallow Fate slipped from White Knife Mouth under gray sail. Davos stood at the tiller beside a battered ship's lantern that hid the brighter cargo below. The crew were iron-born reavers turned sell sails by coin heavier than their grudges. Arya stalked the deck barefoot, testing balance against the roll, twin blades hidden under weathered cloak. Tyrion took the forecastle cabin, poring over maps and a ledger of bribes, catalogued like wines. Kelvin and 2 mute acolytes tended the lantern in the hold, whispering benedictions each time the shard flickered. Wind pressed from west-northwest, larded by cold that smelled of distant ice flows. Bran's consciousness perched within a raven skimming the masthead. When the bird blinked, the sea below switched from steel gray to the eerie aquamarine of memory. He saw older voyages tracing identical wakes, Blackfire rebels smuggling swords, Egon the unlikely learning deck craft, Davos himself ferrying onions to Storm's End. The narrow sea was a palimpsest, every layering of wake and tide, a word in a book the gods rewrote daily. On the 5th midnight, the Fallow Fate dropped anchor beyond Breakwater Point, where Duskendale's watchtowers cast no light for fear of pirate sails. From that still roadstead the town hulked southwest, a ridge of roofs and chimneys slouching toward the forlorn Dun fort on its bluff. Few torches burned ashore. The smell wafting across water was wrong for any fishing port. Sweet, acrid, tinged with pitch. Wildfire fumes, if one knew the scent. Tyrion, standing beside Davos on deck, inhaled once and muttered, "Secrets bigger than their bellies." Davos raised a spyglass. Scorched sun's sigil flies over the customs pier. Half sun, half burst coal. He's pushing new dues on every hull. How would he greet a Northman's galley with no cargo? Tyrion asked. Friendly, if he expects it's bringing coin to settle my long list of IS. Davos' smile was tight as reef rope. He holds them, or claims to. Bought my ledgers from a Braavosi moneylender last winter. I must play the debtor come to kneel. Arya edged from the shadows. Debtors walk. Assassins crawl. We split here. I row with Davos. Tyrion remains aboard, ready to bribe if we're boarded. Kelvin keeps the lantern dark until signaled. Signal? Tyrion raised one brow. 3 tugs on the shoreline, Arya answered. If you feel 4. She shrugged. Cut the rope and raise sail. If you can't outrun them, sink the ship. Better water smother the shard than men set it free. Tyrion swallowed the rest of his wine. Rowing through a drizzle of ash felt like sliding under ruined parchment. The dinghy's oarlocks squealed once. Arya stilled them with a dab of grease. Davos leaned into each stroke, glad for the ache of living muscle. He had ferried princes and queens once, but smuggling a fire snare for the world's last echo of doom felt heavier than sacks of onions by far. At the customs pier, lanterns guttered green, the same sick hue Bran had called beyond Winterfell sky. 2 guards in boiled leather sporting the half-sun sigil questioned Davos in Valyrian-accented common. When he flashed a parchment promising repayment, in rare ore extracted off pike, they nodded, amused, and waved him toward warehouses earmarked for delinquent cargo. Slaves bound in iron moved barrels by torch, eyes lamp-like in the dim. Arya, hood up, walked 2 paces behind Davos, like a silent squire. Inside a barn reeking of salt fish and pitch, the scorched sun waited. He was tall, neither young nor old, with hair the color of banked coals, and a brand on his left cheek. A sunburst seared so deep the flesh shone glassy. Around him lounged mercenaries in mismatched armor. One, a Myrish crossbowman, covered Arya with a loaded quarrel. Another toyed with a jar of wildfire the size of a child's fist. So, the Onion Knight remembers his debts. The scorched sun said, spreading arms in welcome. I count interest by the heartbeat. Your pulse is dear to you, yes? Less dear than the pulse of the realm, Davos answered, bowing. I've sailed with tidings for your ears alone. Buyers richer than Lannisters want dragonglass by the ton. They'll front coin beyond counting, but they demand proof you truly hold Valyria's last ember. A hush followed. Mercenaries shifted. Greed lit their half-lidded eyes. The scorched sun stepped forward. Up close, Arya saw inked traceries around his brand, runes approximating Valyrian glyphs, but crude, as if copied by memory from half-burned pages. He eyed Davos like a man sizing wood for the pyre. Proof has price. My ember sleeps beneath Dun Fort where old tunnels channel the breath of the earth. You'll see it, smuggler, when your buyer's coin stacks before me. Davos bowed again. My ship floats with but a taste of their gold. Let me fetch it ashore at nightfall to whet your appetite. The scorched sun smiled thinly. You leave again, you may not return. One false tide bars the harbor bar. Even smuggling runs must watch the moon. Davos' shrug was a gambler's. After a beat, the would-be king nodded. Nightfall then. Fail, and I will string your ledger around your neck and light it for my supper fire. He gestured dismissal. Davos turned. But as Arya followed, her sharp ears caught whispering from a side loft. Voices chanting near silent, syllables rolling like embers. She glimpsed robed figures ringed around a brazier whose fire burned colorless. The embers call, she guessed, a coaxing hum drawn from below. Back aboard Fallow Fate, they convened in the cramped hold. Davos relayed details. Arya sketched tunneling beneath Dun Fort. Kelvin brushed fingers across the cage's bars. The shard pulsed brighter at mention of tunnels, as if excited. Bran's raven, perched on a spar, cawed once and fell still, eyes glazing white as Bran listened in silence. The ember hides in vent chambers under the fort. Davos finished. They've dug new shafts, probably to reach magma pockets for their wildfire games. Kelvin unrolled a vellum sheet of castle diagrams copied from ancient Darkland records. Ventilation is thin here, he pointed. And here. If we lower the lantern down a defunct flue, heat currents will draw the ember naturally, like moth to candle. Tyrion scratched beard stubble. And if their moth arrives inside a man's chest already beating? We lure both, Arya said. Ember exits host to feast on shard, host falls. If host doesn't fall, I help him bleed. She tucked a dragonglass dagger beside Needle. They agreed on the plan. Nightfall approach up the bluff's sea cave. Follow forgotten smugglers' tunnels to the old crypt beneath Dun Fort. Hang lantern. slip out before dawn. Should the ember take the bait, Bran would sense its snare and send signal by raven. Then Arya would shatter the flue cap, letting seawater flood chambers and drown loose wildfire casks. Nothing living could chase them out through that rush. Evening gloom painted Duskendale violet as Arya and Davos rowed back ashore with 2 small chests of silver crowns. Bait for the scorched sun's greed. Behind them, fallow fate shifted to deeper anchorage under pretext of avoiding reefs. Kelvin and Tyrion loaded the real cargo into a tarred crate slung between them. 2 Ironborn crew volunteered to row the lantern later, bribed by promise of Sansa's pardon for past raids. But while Arya parlayed at the customs pier, Bran saw a different scene through gull eyes. Inside Dunfort's undercroft, the scorched sun knelt naked, but for smeared soot, arms raised toward a vent where red glow pulsed. Chained wildlings circled him, their throats opened one by robed acolytes. Blood steamed upon hot stone. Each death fed the glow, thickening it into tendrils of living flame curling downward. The ember had found its host, was tasting the cup before pouring itself inside. Bran's warning struck Arya mid-sentence like a winter gust. She staggered as if drunk. The scorched sun's lieutenant misread the sway as submission, laughed, and clapped Davos on the back, sealing an escort up to the fort. Arya steadied. Schooling features. Bran's thought pressed again. Hurry. The coal lights its fire tonight. Under torch escort they marched through crooked lanes to Dunfort's looming gate. Duskendale's townsfolk kept shutters barred. Only the half-sun banners fluttered, sewn with real cinders that left black dust on cobbles. At the gatehouse, Arya whispered aside to Davos, "When we reach the inner yard, create noise. I'll vanish." Davos' nod was slight. Inside the grim courtyard, the scorched sun awaited on crude throne built of ship beams half-burned. Flame brands blazed around him. The match of brand and embers in his cheek looked fouler now, edges raw, weeping molten tar. He beckoned Davos near, ignoring Arya, eyes devouring the silver chest. Davos waved a deckhand over to heft it open. As coins glimmered, Davos deliberately tipped the lid, spilling 3 dozen onto mud.I. Mercenaries dove to grab them. Chaos bubbled. Arya melted away. She scaled a stair in darkness, boots silent. Map memory guided her to the east wall where a rusted grate vented hot breath. Stench of copper and tar billowed up. She slipped into the shaft. Below, tunnels writhed like intestines. Carvings of 7-pointed stars defaced by crude suns lined walls, relics of the faith militant siege centuries past. She crawled until the air shimmered with furnace heat. Voices swam upward, chanting again, but frantic now, as if coaxing a wild beast. She eased to a lip overlooking a natural magma pocket. Across a span of cracking stone stood the robed circle. At their center blazed fire shaped like a man's tall shadow, green heart pulsing. The scorched sun knelt within it, yet unburnt, though skin beneath brand blistered. Wildfire jars ringed the scene, stoppers withdrawn, contents bubbling. Arya's gaze tracked venting ducts sloping to shore. She calculated water path. Good. Minutes later, footsteps scraped behind her. Kelvin arrived. Sweat rivering, bearing the lantern wrapped in charcloth. 2 Ironborn followed with rope. One mumbled a curse at the heat. "Lower fast," Arya hissed. They fed rope. The lantern descended into glow. Ember light kissed cage bars, licking sap runes which flared starch white. The shard ignited, steady brilliant green. The fire shadow whirled, sensing rival heart. It surged toward the lantern, but was tethered to flesh. The scorched sun screamed yet smiled, body arched. His eyes turned coals, mouth exhaled a spiral of teeth-thin flame. Arya slashed anchor rope. The lantern fell hard, striking stone, shattering the ossified bowl. Sap runes bled white fire that leapt, net-like, over the ember. All sound imploded, a singular gulping roar, without echo. The lantern's cage flexed as if breathing. For one terrible heartbeat, fire and shard embraced. Then the ember peeled from the host, ripping clear like silk, drawn through bone. The scorched sun collapsed as his mercurial spirit left him. Eyes now two black pits, seeping liquid ash. The net tightened, dragging the ember inside the cage. Once contained, the runes sealed, dimmed to dull gray. Kelvin yanked rope to hoist. Acolytes below wailed, reaching futilely. But the disturbance tipped one wildfire jar. It shattered. Green fire whooshed across oil-soaked floors. More jars burst. Heat hammered the tunnel like a smith's bellows. "Flood it!" Arya shouted. She sprinted to a bronze valve wheel corroded into stone. An ancient fail-safe carved by Eresus pyromancers. The wheel resisted. She threw full weight, boots skidding. At last it cracked free, turning with shriek. Deep sea rumble replied. Water thundered through ducts, salt and foam. From cave mouths along the bluff, geysers burst, hurling brine inland. In the chamber, tidal fury smashed wildfire into hissing emerald storm. Steam billowed. Scalding screams cut short. Arya, Kelvin, and the Ironborn hauled rope. Slipping in spray, cage emerged, draped with sizzling weed. They scrambled back the shaft as water chased them like a living hand. Obsidian walls steamed. Arya felt hair singe but clutched rope. They burst onto the courtyard in chaos. Mercenaries fled, flames spouting from cracks. Davos swung a boarding axe, clearing path to postern gate, where Tyrion waited with bow and a face pale as curdled milk. "Boat's ready," he barked. Lanterns stowed inside a damp sail bag. They dashed to the cliff steps. Behind, Dunfort sagged. Wildfire plumes shot skyward, briefly painting clouds eerie viridian before the deluge smothered them. By miracle or Bran's distant gentling, the fort did not detonate, only slumped like a dying behemoth. Half drowned. On the dinghy, Arya collapsed. Chest heaving. Kelvin lay clutching cage, lips blistered but chanting thanks. Davos rowed with manic strength, splashing ash-flecked water. Above the surf, a raven wheeled thrice. Bran's salute. Lightning flickered far north, where Rhaegal carved air currents to draw lingering ash seaward. The war of wind and fire dwindled to embers and foam. 3 days later, Fallow Fate docked at White Harbor. News flew ahead. Duskendale's would-be tyrant found blackened to bone. Tunnels flooded, mercenaries scattering. No ember of sorcery remained, so rumor claimed. The crew offloaded the lantern under guard of Lord Manderley's sworn swords and a tall iron box lined with lead and runes. Bran awaited in Winterfell's Godswood, looking small and terribly old beneath red leaves. When the cage was set before him, he did not touch it. He only laid a strip of direwolf fur across the bars. Kelvin broke the rune seal with a murmured word. The shards glow, once voracious, now guttered weak, as if starved in confinement. Bran breathed on it, a soft exhale that turned white in cold air. The shard darkened, then went black. Lightless obsidian once again. "The ember dreams no more," he whispered. Sansa, standing close, released a breath she hadn't realized held. Arya smiled, but shadows lingered behind her eyes. Dead men's screams, and the memory of flame freezing into silence. Davos returned to his room at the Broken Tower, where he found parchment forgiving every debt he ever owed, sealed with stark direwolf. Tyrion lingered longest in the Godswood. He studied the now dull shard, then glanced at the others. If the first ember was last of its kind, the world may thank you. Yet Valyria bred many horrors. Some slither colder than fire. Bran's reply held quiet, not entirely human. "The songs of stone are older even than Valyria. We will listen." Spring crept upon the north in hesitant steps. Ash-tainted snow melted, leaving fields speckled with glossy glass dust. Bran rode Rhaegal south, each beat of wings scattering clouds. From that height, he watched peasants collect dust in sacks, to mix with manure, as instructed. In months, black soil would birth wheat, red gold under sun. Arya trained in the yard with spear and bow, but some nights she climbed the battlements and stared east. She would dream of tunnels hissing, of a shadow of flame scrabbling at bars of black glass. Each dawn she checked the iron chest lying beneath Winterfell's crypt steps. Each dawn the lock remained chilled, still. Tyrion departed for King's Landing bearing fresh grain treaties and word of the Ember's defeat. Yet, in his saddlebags, he secreted a wine-skin, whose contents sloshed thicker than wine and glittered green when the cork shifted. He never meant to keep it, only to study, to understand. But knowledge, like fire, asks for fuel. Far to the east, where Valyria's broken spine still smoked, fissures sealed by Bran's wind wall quivered. Yet deep within crust, something moved. Not fire this time, but breath. Eggs forgotten by doom, crusted under slag, heard echoes of warding songs and of dragons' return. In their silent calcite shells they stirred. On a crisp night beneath the heart tree, Bran dreamt of a beach, black sands, waves foaming red, and a pale dwarf kneeling before a glowing pouch, trying to pour its liquid light back into skin of leather. Bran's roots bucked, and he startled awake. He found Sansa waiting, torch in hand. "I had misgivings letting Tyrion leave," she confessed, "but the realm listens to him. Still, I fear any man who comes too close to doom's secrets." Bran rose, voice hoarse. "Then we watch. 1,000 eyes and one." King's Landing received Lord Tyrion Lannister with mixture of curiosity and relief. The city still bore scorch marks from Cersei's wildfire cataclysm years earlier. Green-tinted mortar in alley cracks glowed under moon. Tyrion walked those streets in twilight, remembering ghosts. Above, the dragon pit stood reopened as rookery for Queen Sansa's ravens, but its domed shadow looked to him like a skull half-cleaned by vultures. In a secluded solar of the old Tower of the Hand, Tyrion unpacked the wineskin. He uncorked it, nostrils braced. No smoke rose, only faint glow wormed across the room. He dripped a drop onto a lead plate. It hissed, bore a tiny hole, but quickly went inert. Harmless diluted, he mused. Yet, why did his pulse race? He lifted quill, writing notes. Residue of ember? Or new alchemical distillation? He mused on its uses, its dangers. He considered the faces of dragons, the politics of fear. "Knowledge is power," Cersei once told him. "Fire writes across parchment and bone alike." A sudden gust rattled shutters. Candlelight flared greenish. The droplet on the plate trembled, then crawled, like dew carried by unseen breeze, toward Tyrion's quill. He stared, fascinated revulsion stiffening his arm. The droplet reached feather, burrowed into the hollow shaft, vanished. Quill's nib brightened ember gold. Ink simmered inside the pot, heatless. Tyrion swallowed, throat dry. "Power," whispered a voice too like his own. He burned the page he had written, scattering ash into hearth, but could not bring himself to pour the skin's remainder out. He hid it behind false stones in the wall. At Winterfell, Bran felt a prick like splinter under nail. He opened Weir sight over thousands of leagues, seeking the flicker. It ducked behind marble and plaster, coy. Bran understood then. The ember was not singular but gestalt. When one fragment died, others might yet quicken. He reached deeper, past walls, past vaults, through tunnels of root and memory, until his awareness brushed something older still. A rhythm like a forge hammer in the earth's mantle, smithing new coals slower than any mortal age could measure. Fire sleeps but never dies. Bran withdrew. Snow fell again outside, though calendars said spring. Arya approached, wiping sweat from practice. "Your face tells me the threat isn't ended." "No," Bran answered. "We won a reprieve. Doom is patient." Arya strapped daggers. "Then so are we." Summer unfurled reluctantly across the north, each warm day followed by chill nights that smelled of distant frost. Farmers found black glass seeds sprouting into crocuses, luminous at dusk, beauty born of ruin. Bran guided Rhaegal over fields, the dragon's shadow scattering crows, fat on winter carrion. Fire rumbled inside the beast, but Bran held it in check, knowing each gout cost life, for dragon and rider alike. One evening he landed in the Godswood beside the Heart Tree, and found a stranger waiting. A girl no older than 11, hair white as snow, eyes the liquid green of candle shard. She wore clothes of stitched birch bark and pine needles. When Bran lowered from the saddle, she bowed as a child of the forest might. "Leaf sent me," she said, voice slight and musical. "We heard flame song weaken but not fade. You will need us." She extended a seed, black and shining. "Plant this where dragonfire first touched Westeros. It will grow into a tree whose roots drink fire, whose leaves exhale snow. That balance may hold the coils asleep." Danderol. Bran accepted the seed. Visions spiraled. Aegon's Hill, towers toppled, flames roaring under moonlight. He saw Tyrion in his tower, pressing quill to parchment that now bled green glow into fine calligraphy. He saw eggs quickening beneath seas of slag. Threads of story converged, none yet knotted. He turned to the child. "Tell Leaf I listen." The child faded among trees without footfall. In King's Landing, Tyrion attended council wearing gloves despite heat. When quills sputtered, he replaced them deftly. He warmed to work like a man discovering younger vigor. Yet he checked the hidden skin nightly, ensuring none had leaked. He told himself he was ward, not accomplice. Then came a raven. Iron box containing the dark shard lost all trace of heat, its magic quenched. Sansa asked Tyrion to display it before the court to calm rumors. Reluctantly, he agreed. On presentation day he unlatched the box. The shard indeed lay dull. But as lords and ladies leaned closer, Tyrion felt warmth in his pocket. The quill. He pulled it free by reflex. A drop of ember ink trembled on the nib, fell onto the shard. Everyone gasped as the shard pulsed once, faint but visible. Panic rippled through the throne room. Guards reached. Tyrion slammed the lid shut, but shock had blossomed. Whispers of demon fire. Sorcerer dwarf. Northern conspiracies. Tyrion realized the droplet fed on dormant ember, reconnecting a severed nerve. Even quenched relics could rekindle if seed touched coal. That night, he wrote Bran a letter sealed in gold, confessing all. Before ravens flew, he poured every fluid ounce of ember ink into a thick glass orb, then carried it down to the Blackwater. He cast it into deepest channel on outgoing tide. The orb sank without glow. He hoped. But on distant seabed, a crack hairline appeared where pressure pinched. Green smoke curled, drifting with current toward abandoned wildfire kegs, lost since Battle of Blackwater Bay. Bran read Tyrion's letter beneath moonlit hearttree. He felt anger, sorrow, then grim amusement at the wheel of history grinding on. He told no one but Arya. "Do we hunt our friend?" she asked. "Not yet. He tries to mend what he nicked. Better watch the water." Bran's eyes glazed. "Storms gather. Let them teach their own lessons. Some souls learn only by nearly burning." "Benchow." Arya frowned but acquiesced. She sheathed dagger, hugged Bran lightly, and strode away, leaving him alone with roots and stars. Months passed. Quiet settled like dust on shelf. Crops rose tall in reach, thanks to shards of glass tilled deep. Trade routes reopened through Duskendale, now ruled by council of fisherfolk sworn to Queen Sansa and grateful for coin to rebuild. No one spoke of scorched sun save in taverns where tales inflated to dragons, swallowing forts whole. Yet Bran's sleep seldom deepened. He wandered dreams of magma rivers sluicing under continents, of unborn worms tasting echoing hymns. He sensed the Blackwater's pulse thickening, tinged with brushed coal memory. He kept Rhaegal circling the skies, a green sentinel. In autumn's first week, sailors found fish awash near Massey's Hook, their scales filmed green. Pyromancers, scanning for remnant wildfire, detected faint signatures drifting seaward. Bran convened a raven moot at White Harbor. Maesters reported quills corroding fast when inkpots turned sour in sealed libraries. Bran spoke to the child of birchbark. She told him the seed must be planted now or rot. So he flew south, seed clutched in gloved hand, to Aegon's Hill, where dragons once first landed. There, amid marble fragments, he knelt and pressed seed into soil still scarred by wildfire decades gone. He whispered weir songs learned from leaf. Snowflakes fell, though sky was clear. Saplings sprouted before dusk. Trunk thin, bark black, glass vined white, leaves pale blue. It hissed faint steam. Farmers nearby swore the air cooled 10 paces around it, even in midday heat. Bran watched until roots anchored, then mounted Rhaegal and turned for Blackwater mouth. Above the bay, he saw tendrils of green mist twining from water, barely visible under sun. He guided Rhaegal lower. The dragon sniffed, rumbling. Bran let him exhale a measured gout of flame onto the mist. Fire met sorcery. Steam billowed. Ash rained harmless. But deeper rumbles replied, wildfire stores awakening where the orb cracked. Bran realized if that seepage found the old cavern caches, still sealed under the city, conflagration would make doom's ash seem bridal lace. He banked Rhaegal toward the dragon pit, where Tyrion waited, summoned by urgent raven. When they met, Bran spoke plain. Tyrion's face aged a decade listening. He offered no excuses, only a plan. Flood the subterranean vaults permanently. He would order water gates built, bribes paid, spintail of sewer renovation. Bran shook head. Too slow. We drown it tonight. Impossible, Tyrion whispered. But Bran already called to Viera, dragoness now full grown under Queen Sansa's care. Stalwart Hearthfire, and Sunspine, a hatchling nurtured in the Vale by Lord Royce's maester. Dragons answered, wings blotting dusk. At moonrise, 4 dragons descended on Blackwater Bay. Bran rode Rhaegal. Sansa, wearing leathers, climbed behind Viera's narrow spikes. Samwell, despite terror, clung to Hearthfire bearing sacks of iron seed preserved by children's song, and Davos commanded Sunspine's rider, a wildling named Flare, via beacon boats. Bran directed them to points where centuries-old pipes vented city sewage. Dragons unleashed controlled fire and ice breath. A trick Viera learned by inhaling snow through special flutes to fuse clay, collapse tunnels, sealing catacombs from river. Hearthfire then scattered ironseed, powder that blossomed into rust in contact with sorcery-tainted moisture, congealing like scabs. Below, wildfire stirred angrily, but with no oxygen, its tantrum quieted. The ember mist thinned, drew back seaward and dissipated. At dawn, the bay shimmered silver, unmarred. Tyrion watched from ramparts, tears tracing soot on cheeks. Bran landed beside him. I failed, Tyrion said. You erred, Bran corrected. Failure is refusing to mend. Remember. Tyrion nodded, resolve forging anew. He would champion strictures on wildfire, fund guilds to dredge the bay, hunt hidden stocks. Days later he wrote edicts limiting possession of sorcerous materials, edicts the realm surprisingly welcomed. Seasons turned. The sapling on Aegon's Hill grew a yard each moon, leaves iridescent by night. Some feared it. Street children called it Frost Weir. Yet beneath its canopy lovers met and quarreling parties found calm, claiming the air cooled hot words. The city began leaving offerings of melted glass beads at its roots. Bran visited sometimes, feeling ember threads recoil from the tree's aura. Balance might hold after all. In far Valyria, dormant eggs away under slag twitched, but did not hatch. Doom's lullaby quieted. Years later, on the anniversary of the Doom's second thwarting, Winterfell hosted a feast. Snow fell but hearths blazed. Arya returned from exploring west of the Sunset Sea, telling tales of islands where fireflies glowed blue as Frostweir leaves. Davos captained grain fleets, feeding half the realm. Maester Kelvin wrote treatises on binding spells, now taught at Citadel with Sam's sponsorship. Bran sat at high table beside Queen Sansa. He ate little, eyes often distant, but laughter reached him like warm tide. Rhaegal slept in eyrie above, wings furling in dream. All seemed well. When musicians struck quiet chords, Bran rose, surprising many. He spoke softly, yet all hushed. Fire tried the world twice, he said. Each time hands joined, wolf and lion, onion and swallow, child and tree, dragon and man. Remember this. Doom is never vanquished by blade alone, nor by clever tongue, nor by king's decree, but by the weaving of all. When next shadow rises, let memory be our lantern. Beow. He lifted a cup of watered wine. Every lord and free rider echoed the toast. In that moment, the north, the reach, the vale and crownlands felt thread-bound like tapestry under loving needle. Bran sat, weary yet content. Somewhere south, frost weir rustled in spring breeze like distant applause. In the deeps of earth, coals cooled another fraction. Balance, precarious yet real, held. For now the world turned not toward doom, but toward dawn. And now, Undi. Arya's knife spun in her fingers as effortlessly as a maple seed caught in spring breeze. She leaned against the window embrasure on the solar's southern side, watching the hushed realms of Winterfell below. Far past midnight, torchlight guttered in the lower ward. But summer's twin moons silvered the rooftops, and the first lupine cries of hunting direwolves drifted over stone. She had returned only hours before. Salt still crusted on her boots, sunburn peeling her nose, windmilling tails stuffed in her throat like caged songbirds, and still the ache of voyage sat in her bones. Across the solar Bran hovered by the hearth, face bathed in gentle fireglow. His gaze seemed to funnel past the flames toward distances no mortal map charted. Arya knew the look. He was walking, though his feet never moved. Rhaegal dozed on the ramparts outside, but Bran's mind soared on darker wings tonight. She cleared her throat. You're roaming too far. I can smell the ocean on you, and you never left the room. Then? Bran blinked back to himself. His pupils dilated, momentarily startled, as though the sudden smallness of a single candle-lit chamber pained him more than cold. Not the ocean, he murmured. An inland sea, ringed by marble cliffs, and a tower that bleeds white smoke from its crown. Yet, there is no fire inside. Another dream. Not dream. Warning. The frost wear at Aegon's Hill. Its roots drink fire, but the leaves breathe out winter. Something has answered that exhale. He extended a palm, and tiny green sparks crawled over his skin. Remnant motes from the weir net. I followed those breath currents west, past the sunset sea where you sailed. Beyond even your newest maps. There is land, Arya, and on that land stands a hollow spire of pale stone, buckled like a fluted shell. Within it a heart of ice beats among embers, both at once. Arya's brow creased. Is it threat or riddle? Both. Bran exhaled. The sparks faded, and the sparks taste familiar. They bear the flavor of the ember we fought, and the hush of the Night King's winter, knitted. Somebody. Something. If that union grows, fire and ice will not war. They will fuse. What emerges may think itself lord of all seasons. Then? Arya flipped the knife into its sheath. Then we sail again. Show me where. Bran inclined his head but hesitated. I cannot leave the weir net for long. My mind is its hinge. If I tear away for months, the lattice slackens and Dune's singing wakes. You must go without me. She grinned. Last time I steered by ravens and riddles. This time perhaps you'll send a compass. Bran lifted the silver wolf head token he wore around his neck, a keepsake forged from first ember slag and frost weir sap mixed into living steel by Winterfell's smith witches. He pressed it into her palm. It pulsed faintly, neither warm nor cold. A lodestone to my sight. Should I need to reach you, it will glow. Should you need me, press it to your heart and think my name. She pocketed it, and the wolf seemed to settle against her ribs like a second heartbeat. I'll need a ship. Davos' fleet is harrying pirates off the arbor. Bentry. Bran's gaze shifted. Not a ship, an air rider. Arya stared. You'd put me on a dragon? Rhaegal is tied to me. Hearthfire and Sunspine guard the capital. But Vieira has laid a clutch of 3, and one hatchling, still wing short, bonds by choice rather than command. Her name is Embersnow. Small enough to perch on Summerhall's last tower, large enough to cross an ocean if coaxed. She answers strongly to you when you walk the yard. I have seen her nuzzle your sleeve for mice. Bah! A part-grown dragon guided by me? Arya's grin widened, equal parts thrill and dread. I'm no dragon rider. You are a Stark, Bran said. Yet you rode the faceless winds as though they were reins. Balance and nerve are the chief saddles. Arya let the idea settle like armor. Queen Sansa will object. She trusts you to slip blades into darkness. Now she must trust you to carry dawn across strange waters. He reached to the hearth, pinched a coal, and muttered. The ember cooled instantly into gray stone between his fingers. Take Davos, though. One rider guides, one sailor reads wines. And take Gilly's son, Aaron. He's grown tall, and Old Town says he hears ice sing through glass. If Frost Weir calls, his blood might read it. 3 companions, Arya mused. A hatching dragon makes 4. Seems fated. A square against the world's circle. She shook her head, laughter under her breath. I leave at dawn, then. The courtyard quaked when Embersnow unfolded charcoal wings shot through with ghost-white streaks. She trumpeted at the sunrise. Nothing like Rhaegal's thunder, more a high keen of eagerness. Arya climbed ridged shoulders, every muscle tuned for sudden flight. Davos secured rope harnesses around a half-barrel of provisions, his sea legs now confronting the sky's deck. Aaron, broad-shouldered youth of 17, clutched glass flutes and windroses borrowed from Old Town. Winterfell's staff assembled in hushed wonder. Sansa, cloak snapping, stepped to Embersnow's snout, and laid her hand gently. Pierce the sky, and return it quiet. The queen whispered to the dragon. Embersnow blinked golden eyes and lowered her head. The tip of her horn brushed Sansa's crown in solemn promise. With one mighty beat, the dragon hurled skyward. Stonework shrank beneath taloned feet, banners flapped, wolves howled. Arya's laughter tore free, ripped away by tearing wind. Davos cursed as straps bit his ribs, yet his grin matched hers. They banked southwest. Rhaegal appeared, spiraling once in farewell escort before wheeling back east. Beyond the neck, the land shed greens for golds of late summer. Storm's End gleamed on its cliff like a seashell. Queen's Crown Tower winked between trees. Embersnow's wings punched jet streams, propelling them across the dusk-lit sunset sea long after shoreline slipped behind. Night blanketed water. Stars wheeled. Davos pointed out constellations renamed by maesters after Second Doom. The anchor, the shattered candle. Arryn raised a flute carved from dragonbone. He blew one soft note. Frost breath puffed from the hole, though air remained warm. Arya felt Bran's lodestone tingle. Dawn found no horizon but water. On second dusk, a blackness blemished the red sunset ahead. Not cloud, a landmastet. Embersnow shrieked elation. She arrowed downward, banked over ragged basalt cliffs crusted white with guano, then alighted on a bowl-shaped depression half a league across. The island looked wounded, deep fissures choked with mist, as though some titan clawed it. Scrub pines clung where soil pooled. At its center rose the tower Bran foretold, not built of quarried blocks, but of melted glassy stone whirled like cooled slag. Dozens of slender flutes spiraled round its girth, threading upward into a hollow crown that exhaled white plumes, odorless and cold. Davos' voice hushed to awe. Smoke without fire. Arryn laid a hand on tower bark. Frost blossomed under his palm. It sucks warmth, he murmured. Like lungs drawing breath but never exhaling heat. Arya pressed the wolf token. It warbled faintly, tugged toward tower archway. We go inside. They tethered Embersnow to a bent cedar. The dragon huffed, uneasy. Torchlight seemed tasteless here. Flames burned pale blue, lacking crackle. The entrance yawned like a melted keyhole. They stepped into shadow. Inside, walls pulsed faintly with veins of alternating onyx and diamond, where fire and ice fused. The floor sloped downward into the earth, Every step numbed toes yet left sweat beading brows. Halfway down the spiral, Aren gasped. Figures lined alcoves. Humanoid but genderless, carved of translucent quartz, shot through with sparks. Some stood, arms outspread. Others sat cross-legged, faces serene. All were hollow statues save for swirling motes trapped in each chest. Some motes glowed ember green, others glimmered frost blue. And where two motes swirled intertwined, the stone's surface shimmered alive. These statues' eyes flickered silver. Arya drew needle. "Are they sleepers? Or prisons?" Davos murmured. Further down they emerged into a vast cavern. Stalagmite columns supported night-dark roof. Between them floated a sphere the size of Winterfell's hall, composed of water suspended mid-air. Inside the sphere, twin cores rotated. An inner gleam of living ice wrapped tight around a molten heart, neither melting nor cooling. The cores churned slowly, pulsing synchronous with distant thunder of buried tides. Aren dropped his flutes. "A heart of seasons," he whispered. The wolf token scorched Arya's ribs suddenly. Bran's voice hissed through mind. "Do not touch the sphere. But listen." Thunder rolled again, closer, rhythmic. From shadow shapes detached. Tall guardians, larger than statues above, forged of that same fused stone. They carried staves tipped with rough diamond. Eye sockets burned silver. Arya stepped forward, knife angled. "We come to understand, not to war." The guardians halted, staves striking floor in unison. Echoes rippled through cavern and up tower flutes. Air itself vibrated. The floating sphere brightened. Ice core exhaled a flurry of diamond dust. Molten core belched sparks. The tower's vents topside gusted louder, sending white plumes skyward. Aren clutched his ears. Images pummeled their minds. Eruption of red mountains, collapse of ice fields, dragons screaming, children of forest singing, humans kneeling beneath two moons. Then quiet, an accord. One guardian spoke, voice like wind across icicles. "We are the wardens of balance. Long have we slumbered until world scars reopened. Twice have mortals dragged unseasoned fire across snow. Twice have mortals thrust winter into hearths of life. The lattice strains. We gather fragments, embers, shivers, to weave new equilibrium. Then Dawander." Arya straightened. "Your weaving nearly unmade the world already. Fire sought to swallow continents. Ice sought endless night. Because they wore unbound, we bind them in concord. Yet our coil lacks final symmetry. We require a living conduit, heart warm yet blood cooled, mind tempered by both night and forge." Davos muttered, "They want a vessel." Aren stepped backward, dread dawning. He glanced at Arya. "I feel them inside my skull, weighing me." Arya moved between him and guardians. "No." Her voice rang small, but unflinching. "The realm bleeds enough from kings and gods. Whatever binding you attempt, do it without enslaving flesh." The guardian's diamond tip touched stone. "Then fire shall burn and frost shall march until equal ruin unites them." The sphere shuddered. Molten filaments licked ice heart. Steam jetted. Wind screamed up flutes. Bran shouted through Arya's mind, "Shatter the coil. The core is linchpin. Break its stillness and imbalance scatters." "Needle want pierce water," Arya answered aloud. Then she remembered. Ember snow. She whirled. "Davos, Aren. Back to the dragon. Buy me time." She sprinted up spiral as cavern roared. Guardians followed but ponderous. Their fused feet cracked floor where frosty steam congealed. Above, ember snow shrieked alarm. Frost blossomed on her scales. She tried to flap, but a gust from tower vents pinned her. Arya tore rope harness free. "Fly, girl." The dragon's eyes reflected inferno and blizzard at once. Arya vaulted onto Saddle Ridge. "Down the chimney," she hissed. Against every instinct, ember snow plunged snout into mouth-like vent. Claws scraped glassy stone, wings folded tight. She slid, spiraling inward down tower throat. Heat scalded scale from one flank. Cold burned the other numb. Arya ducked, riding the dragon's spine like arrow shaft in notched bow. They burst into cavern roof in shower of shards. Sphere loomed below, flickering violent. Arya drew the dragonglass dagger Bran gifted years ago, etched with children's runes, forged by Rhaegal's heat, quenched in frostweir sap. Balance in blade. Dive, she commanded. Embersnow folded wings. Spear pointing at sphere. Guardians howled. Staves hurled lightning arcs of blue and green. A bolt grazed Embersnow's tail, detonating a scale into sparks. Arya's ears rang. Closer, 30 yards, 10. Wind hammered her chest. At 5 yards she rose in stirrup, hurled the dagger with all her water dancer training. Blade spun end over end, rune script glimmering, and struck where ice heart kissed molten ember. Sound vanished. A mute bloom of white surrounding green and sapphire bursts. Sphere imploded, water flashing to steam so instant a hurricane birthed in cavern. Guardians shattered to dust. Columns snapped, roof fissured. Embersnow snapped wings open, halted descent, and shot skyward through collapsing flutes. Arya clung as eddies of steam pursued. Tower buckled. Stone melted, froze, sheared away. A final roar flung Embersnow clear above island. The ground convulsed. Vents across cliffs vented twin plumes, one pale blue, one ember red, that twisted then dissolved like quarreling ghosts. Dragon and riders landed on distant ridge. Embersnow trembled from wounds. Ice and ash sloughed from her hide. Arya dismounted smelling burnt hair. Davos and Arryn staggered from scrub, both alive but singed. The island quieted, tower now a heap of frosted obsidian. Arryn knelt, fingers in soil. The pull, gone. Torchflies buzzed, their bodies neither frozen nor aflame. Simple, living luminescence. Arya pressed lodestone. Bran's warmth flooded. Core undone. Balance resets. Hurry home. Their return flight stretched across 4 days. Embersnow healed quickly, appetite voracious. Davos rigged seaweed nets to snatch fish mid-air. Arryn's flutes now poured normal breath, though sometimes, at dusk, a reluctant wisp of fog joined notes. When Winterfell's ramparts rose on horizon, horns greeted them, and Rhaegal roared welcome. Bran waited beneath frostbitten heart tree, Sansa at his side. Snow flurried unseasonably, though midsummer neared. As Embersnow alighted, Bran touched her muzzle. The dragon nuzzled. "You saw the wardens?" Bran asked quietly. Arya relayed the tale. Bran listened, eyes half-veiled. The wardens existed before Valyria, fragments of those who forged Long Night's first chains. They vowed to hold fire and ice apart until men learned to honor both. But time eroded their song, leaving only zeal and prisons. Dandan. They wanted Arryn for vessel. Bran's gaze softened on the youth. Because his blood runs from Craster and Gilly, touched by White Walker magic yet tempered by life, under citadel domes. A hybrid promise, but choice remains his, always. Bran placed hand on Arryn's shoulder. "We'll train you to hear both songs without succumbing." Sansa exhaled relief. "So the threat lies quelled?" "For now," Bran answered. "We taught wardens failure of compulsion. They will not weave flesh again. Yet shards of their coil may drift. And south, the frost weir grows. Each leaf a page for new bargains between seasons. Nenderol. Autumn painted Westeros with copper. In King's Landing, Tyrion oversaw dredging of Blackwater Channel, hauling up dozens of corroded wildfire jars whose contents had curdled inert. He smashed each beneath frost weir shavings. Green flames died to gray dust. Rumors began calling him Tyrion the Tempered. In Old Town, Samwell raised a circle of maesters sworn to study balanced alchemy, forging alloys of dragonglass and wrought iron quenched in snowmelt dye. They invented glow lamps emitting harmless blue-green luminescence, replacing fire-risk candles in poorer quarters. Children of the forest visited the citadel openly, teaching root script. Arya refused all honors. She spent winter nights sparring in courtyard, sometimes with Aaron, sometimes with Embersnow, who'd grown thrice original size. On one dawn she found Bran leaning on balcony rails, gaze fixed south. "Dreams again?" she asked. He smiled wryly. "Visions. Not warning, invitation." The wardens retreated into World's Crust to mend themselves. "They send thanks. Through wind you can taste in first snowfall." Then Underwind. Arya flicked his shoulder. "You sound bardic. Careful or Tyrion will steal your lines for small folks' plays." Bran laughed, a sound still rare. "Let him. Stories remind us we're threads, not tapestry done." She joined him at rail. To east, Rhaegal curled around the broken tower. To west, Embersnow balanced on New Eyrie, wings mantled copper. The sky between them shimmered with dawn, neither winter gray nor summer rose, and in between shade, poised. "Think we'll ever rest?" Arya asked. "Rest is for bones," Bran said. "We live. Living is weaving." Then tss. She nodded. Below, courtyard gates swung open, and a column of travelers entered. Dwarves of the Iron Hills across sea, priests of Rhoynar water lore, Summer Islander astronomers. All had come seeking counsel and balance. How to tame floods without drought, hearths without holocaust. Sansa strode to greet them, cloak bright against dusting snow. Life marched, relentless yet newly measured. Bran turned from sunrise, faced Hearttree. He laid palm on bark. Blood sap pulsed slow. Steady, neither too hot nor too chill. Enough, he thought, and the tree, and perhaps all of Westeros, answered. For now, enough. The wolf token at Arya's chest vibrated once more, then fell silent. No alarm, only the quiet hum of connection persisting. Mid-morning light caught frostweir leaves far south. They glittered like tiny mirrors reflecting both fireside and moongleam. Sailors on the Blackwater swore breeze smelled of pine and ember together, and sailed on, unafraid. High over all, dragons rode thermals. Green, gold, charcoal snow, neither conquerors nor leviathans of ruin, but keepers of upper winds, shepherds of currents, free but mindful. Their shadows flickered across fields where glassy crocuses waved, and children chased those shadows, laughing, never worrying whether the wings beat hot or cold. A.K.1G. A pale dawn mist rolled over the wolfswood like spilled milk, muffling the clank of axes and the crunch of tiny frost-veined leaves beneath mailed boots. Bran watched from the highest gallery of Winterfell's broken tower, his breath drawing gentle clouds in the still cold air. Far below, a team of carpenters were erecting a temporary amphitheater beside the training yard, a ring of viewing benches for the great conclave Queen Sansa had summoned, a gathering meant to consecrate the fragile peace that fire, ice, and human hands had finally managed to weave. This morning, however, Bran could hear a different thrum through the castle's stones, an anxious vibration that had nothing to do with hammers or saws. A pulse, faint but insistent, beat through the new lattice of the weir net like a disturbed heart. Somewhere, something tugged at the stitches of balance the world had so painfully threaded. He closed his eyes and stretched his senses outward. From leaf to root to riverbed he traveled, skipping along the shared nerves of stone and willow, into frost-slick ravines and across moorland ridges blooming with dusk-blue crocus. His mind darted beyond Frostweir's gently shimmering boughs on Egan's Hill, past drifting smoke of King's Landing forges and the newly raised seawall at Blackwater mouth, and found, at last, the source of the tremor. In the far southwestern sky, beyond the Guyland Straits and the wine-bright crescent of the Summer Isles, lay a smoldering archipelago known to old Valyrian charts as the Skulls of Sorion died. Jagged islets like fossilized vertebrae broke storm-fat water, each crowned by broken towers of basalt. Bran's sight pierced cloud and distance to hover over the largest of those isles, where a bruised purple tide lapped at black sand beaches gleaming with the opal flecks of volcanic glass shards. There, beneath the ruined ribs of a garrison keep lost to all memory, a new growth pulsed, a tree with bark, the iridescent green of wildfire, and leaves rimed in hoarfrost, budding out of molten rock as though contradiction itself had taken root. The tree's trunk was barely thicker than a child's waist, yet it glowed from within, fiber veins carrying streaks of ember and veins of adder blue ice. Bran felt every beat of that unholy sap, each throb a steady siphon drawing warmth from the island's sulfur vents and chill from night's salted winds. The guardians of balance, those hollow wardens Arya had confronted, had sworn to retreat beneath the crust to mend their broken song, but someone, or something, had stolen the tune. Bran tasted mortal will in the tree's inception, the restless handiwork of men. He felt spells twisted into roots like barbed wire, a rush of mortal blood and dragon's bone ground fine, bound by sung Valyrian glyphs older even than doom. Someone builds a second coil, Bran realized. And this one beats to human ambition, not cosmic parity. A wind chime rattled nearby, snapping him back into his body. He opened his eyes to find Rhaegal's watching, slitted pupils enormous with intuition. Bran reached to scratch the ancient dragon's brow, and Rhaegal rumbled. "This tree," Bran whispered against green-scaled skin, "grows where no tree should. We need eyes upon it, or wolves will chase specters while hawks steal the flock." Rhaegal's tail thumped the stones. Arya arrived moments later, as though drawn by the dragon's thrumming. Her hair had grown past collarbone now, still dark as midnight water, and a filigree of silvery scars along her neck, and wrists marked where Frostweir's sap had once sprayed when she shattered the balance sphere months ago. Embersnow swooped behind her, wings casting snakeskin shadows, still half again smaller than Rhaegal, but sleek with mature muscle. The dragoness circled once above and perched atop the tower's parapet, opposite Rhaegal, keen eyes flicking between Bran and her rider. "You called?" Arya asked, pulling her wolf-tooth gloves snug. "We even echo in the lattice," Bran said. Another sapling grew fast, grown foul. "It feeds on contradictory currents, same as Frostweir, but purposeful and wrong." "Location?" "Isles southwest. Sorian." Arya whistled low. "That's half a world's flight. No ravens follow that far." "Embersnow does. She'll need rest mid-route." Arya glanced at the amphitheater construction below. "Conclave begins in 2 days. Sansa can't lose both her court's voice and her blade at once." "She won't." Bran rested gnarled fingers on Arya's shoulder. "The conclave's true weight is in words, not presence. Tyrion speaks enough for 3 Starks. I'll weave my thoughts through the heart trees for Sansa. She needs you more where the coil sprouts." "And the wind." Arya's jaw flexed. She'd seen enough phantom threats rise from distant horizons. They always struck home eventually. "I want Aron with me," she said. "His ice sense is stronger. And Davos knows every current south of the Arbor. He can fish wind patterns for Embersnow." She hesitated. "And I want Gendry's hammer. If we must shatter another bad seed, fire-forged steel won't fail." "You shall have them," Bran answered. Aron Tarly, no longer awkward Sam's gangly ward, but a broad-shouldered young man, arrived with a satchel of dragonbone flutes and a newly forged dragonglass staff capped with a Frostweir crystal. His mismatched eyes, one blue like morning frost, one brown like fresh soil, reflected both caution and naive faith. Davos sailed upriver that evening aboard the Snow Onion, a slim sloop modified with air scoops that let it catch dragon downdrafts and draft behind their wings, like a gull trailing a leviathan. Gendry Baratheon rode up from the Reach smithies bearing a warhammer whose head glimmered white steel veined with veins of starlight, the alloy of dragonglass powder and Iron Sam's maesters had perfected. Queen Sansa stood in Winterfell's gatehouse as they mustered at dawn. She pressed a parchment of royal writ into Davos' hand, granting him authority to trade northern grain for Summer Island or citrus, official cover for their voyage. To Aron, she gave a necklace strung with a single pearl that pulsed faint frost blue. "If your heart falters," she whispered, "crush the pearl. Bran will feel it break." "And?" Gendry knelt for Sansa's blessing, bashful despite his lordly titles. She touched his brow with cold fingertips. "You may shape iron to serve, Gendry, but you always serve life, not war. Remember that." He rose, ears red. Rhaegal launched first, tail slicing air. He would escort them along the western shoreline until they reached open deep. Then the elder dragon would return north, his bond to Bran too tight. Ember Snow followed, carrying Arya and Arryn harnessed behind her neck ridges, while Gendry and Davos guided the snow onion in the slipstream below. The world unfurled beneath, ribbon rivers, cedar dark hills, the chalk cliffs where Fagon's ghosts were said to moan in sea caves. By sunset of their second day, they reached the fringes of summer sea. Warm currents lifted spiced air, and starlings painted the sky. Rhaegal roared farewell, banking north as Ember Snow pressed on, her wing beats deeper now, matching the hum of distant thunderheads. 3 nights later, islands broke the water like jagged teeth. Lava plumes glowed on the horizons, reflecting on low clouds. The skulls of Saurian were exactly the ominous silhouettes Bran had described. Spines of ancient volcanoes frozen mid-eruption, ringed by razor reefs. Davos guided the sloop between 2 reefs that left only a sliver of safe water. Ember Snow glided overhead scouting for threat. The nearest isle showed faint green sparks dancing in cracks along its slope. Wildfire veins or something stranger. They anchored the snow onion in a half-collapsed caldera bay. A sulfuric haze clung to the cove. Up the slope, tumbled ramparts of a Valyrian garrison jutted like broken fingers from basalt. At the crater's rim, the poisonous tree pulsed, half ember, half frost, sending faint shivers over the black sand. Arryn hugged himself, teeth chattering though the air was tropic warm. It sings like the coil, but the tune is off-key, like children screaming lullabies. Davos muttered a prayer to the Seven. Whatever wrong note it croaks, we cut the windpipe fast. Arya unslung needle and gestured Gendry forward. We find the root, break it. They ascended an ancient stair carved into glassed stone. Each step glowed dull green under boots. Ember Snow hugged the thermal vents mid-altitude. Circling. Davos, slower on an old knee, puffed behind. They entered the broken hall, where Valyrian mosaics still flickered with captured starlight. At the hall's far end, a bronze-inlaid door remained strangely intact. Glyphs of twisting dragons and suffering men coiled across its face. Gendry set the hammer aside, traced the glyphs. "These aren't warnings," he said, brow furrowed. "They're a calendar. Phases of a forge." Arya felt along the seam. Heat bled beneath metal like blood under old scab. She braced herself and shoved. Hinges screeched. Sulfur steam rolled out, dimming torches. Inside, the chamber yawned open. Half forge, half laboratory. Long cold yet newly disturbed. Fresh drag tracks scored soot dust. A scattering of butchered seagulls littered the floor. At the center, a dais held 3 slanted slabs of obsidian. On the nearest lay a body, an emaciated man whose chest cavity gaped open, ribs spread like petals. Inside, a network of thin pipes threaded from heart to throat, fused to bone with glassy crimson resin. His eyes were sealed behind a sheen of ice. His mouth emitted a thread of green smoke that curled toward the roots sprouting from the slab. Arryn recoiled, bile rising. They grafted him to the sapling. Not 6 yards away, the living tree thrust through a crack in floor and ceiling alike, sap crystallizing mid-drip. Its branches clawed the vaulted roof, each leaf, a vein of cold and flame, fused. Arya's mind flashed to the warden's frozen statues. This was worse. Human sacrifice feeding stolen songs to a hungry myth. She pivoted, scanning corners. Who did this? A dry laugh crawled from the gloom. A figure stepped from shadow. A woman in ragged robes, the iridescent green of wildfire, face half-masked in white lacquer that gleamed like rime frost. The exposed half of her skin glimmered faintly, like pearl filaments under flesh. I had hoped the guardians would come themselves. She hissed. But I see they have sent wolves, stags, and the offscour of craven lords. Arya leveled her point. Name yourself. I was once Niharia of House Celtigar. last flame tongue of Claw Isle. I bent knee to dragons and dragons burned my bloodline for it, leaving only ash and salt behind. So I will raise something purer than dragons, an equalizer of seasons. And I will feed it every drop of dragonfire I can wring from this ruin. Bam! She drew a thin rod of starlight-bright crystal, half blue, half green, singing discordant notes when she flicked wrist. The tree responded. Leaves shivered, shedding shards that skittered over the floor like errant ice chips. Arin gasped. That rod, made from frostweir seed. Niharia's smile was cool. Your queen's pretty little sapling is not so secure as she believes. Roots travel. Birds peck. I needed only a sliver. Gendry hefted his hammer. Then we'll take it back. She darted the rod downward. A surge of power rippled through stone. The grafted corpse arched and exhaled a hellish wail, half steam whistle, half dying dragon. From cracks in the wall, more corpses tore free, attached by fibrous tendrils, stumbling forward like marionettes jerked by one insane puppeteer. Davos drew a long knife carved from dragon glass. 7, save us. Arya sprinted, sliding beneath the first corpse puppet's swiping claw. She slashed its tendon, leapt, and severed the vine connecting it to the tree. The puppet froze. Meanwhile, Gendry barreled in, hammer whistling. Bone shattered, sap blood sprayed. Arin backed toward the sapling's root, raising his staff. He blew one soft note on a bone flute. The tree's leaves shuddered. Frost crystals fissured along sap lines. Niharia scowled and whipped her rod, counternote humming. Ice vapor ignited mid-air, blossoming into shards that shot toward Arin. He dove. His flute splintered from his grasp. Arya vaulted over the second puppet, parried green-white claw with needle, then flipped to land near Niharia. The wildfire priestess thrust the rod. Arya deflected with the steel dragonglass dagger Bran had gifted her long ago. Sparks of opposite magics erupted. Arya's arm went numb. Your steel carries both songs, Niharia mused. Yet you wield it like a child jabbing coals. Arya thrust again, forcing Niharia back against the dais. Embersnaw's roar reverberated outside, rattling stone. Flames licked beneath the doorway where the dragon exhaled warning. Gendry smashed another puppet, then swung for the tree trunk, but a sudden shockwave flung him aside, Niharia's rod pulsing. He crashed into Davos. Both tumbled among broken bulbs and shards of obsidian. The priestess laughed, pivoted, and tapped her rod to the tree root. If you would shatter this coil, you must break its heart, stark girl. But the heart now beats in me. Frost raced vines into her torso. Embers lit her eyes. She rose into the air, limbs alight like twin torches of winter and summer dancing in the same flame. Arin scrambled for his staff and flute shards. Gendry, dazed, crawled toward his hammer. Davos, cut along forehead, found shape barely up. This fight teetered. Arya felt Bran's token burn hot at rib. His voice crashed in her skull. Draw her outside. Fire must meet sky or ice will swallow you all. She rolled, ducking twin lances of fused light, sprinted through the doorway, and whistled. A high Bravosi call. Embersnow kicked off from parapet and thrust head through shattered arch, unleashing a plume of searing flame. Niharia barreled after Arya, rising like will-o-wisp. Smoke curled from her heels. Frost sloughed from her shoulders. Outside, dawn cracked the horizon, painting waves iron blue. Arya dashed down the stairwell as Embersnow flapped above like a thunderhead, screaming challenge. Niharia hovered in pursuit, rod blazing. Below in the crater bay the sloop listed, sails slack. Davos caught Arya's eye and hurled a coil of rope over the rail. She seized it, vaulted, and landed on deck as Niharia streaked overhead. Arin and Gendry tumbled after, bruised but alive. Arya shouted, "Hoist anchor!" She drags power from the land, pull her onto water. 9. Davos leapt to the helm, shoved the sloop seaward. Embersnow dove, sighting the mainsail's top yard with talons, lifting the ship forward like a kite skimming foam. Sudden momentum blasted spray across deck. Niharia shrieked frustration, thrust rod downward. A beam of fused light punched through the water ahead, flash boiling a plume of steam that momentarily blinded all. Arryn staggered to starboard with Gendry's hammer, stumbled, but swung, connecting with a vine of energy trailing behind Niharia. Spark spray erupted. The priestess's flight faltered, tipping her into the steam cloud. Embersnow roared. Arya signaled with torch, 3 quick circles. The dragon angled wings, slowed, wheeled back. Niharia surfaced mid-steam, dripping frost that hissed against her ember-lit skin. She aimed the rod again. Gendry hurled his hammer like a comet. The star-forged head smashed into Rod's base. Metal shrieked, cracks spider-webbed. Rod snapped in two. Niharia's shriek choked off as opposite forces inside her tore free. Embers belched from one half, ice shards from the other. She convulsed, each element ripping at flesh, but refusing to separate. Arya shouted, "Now!" Arryn raised the broken flute shards, pressed them together, muttered Sam's incantation of binding ice to hush flame. Frost blue light poured from shards, wrapped Niharia in spiraling helix. Embersnow dove, exhaled white-hot flame that melted frost, and refused it into glass cocoon around the priestess. The sloop raced clear, Embersnow towing. Arya watched over the stern rail as Niharia's glass shell plummeted, sinking beneath waves that fizzed green then cool. The fused rod halves sank after, trailing blue sparks that guttered out. A roar shattered the cliff. The sapling at the ruins withered like salted slug, leaves collapsing into ash frost mush. The mangrove slumped lifeless. Across the archipelago, fissures vomited last gouts of fire and ice, then stilled. Hours later, they anchored in calmer water. Embersnow perched on stern castle, tail coiled, wings drooping with exhaustion. Gendry reclaimed his battered hammer, eyeing new fractures across its gleaming surface. "We'll need reforging," he muttered. Arryn studied the flute shards fused into one crystal rib. "We made a new instrument," he mused weakly. The pearl at his throat pulsed slow and steady, unbroken. That night, as the group camped on deck beneath silent stars, Bran's voice drifted through Arryn's dreams, thanking each of them. Bran and Sansa felt the coil snap, balance steadied. Back in Winterfell weeks later, the conclave was already in its final debates. Tyrion's rhetoric had drawn pledges from the Reach and Dorne for joint wildfire policing. Iron Island Thal worshippers grudgingly agreed to limit burning of driftwood kings. The Frostweir governance charter would move forward. Only the Vale's Lord Anders Royce withheld signature, fearing unnatural binding of magic in roots of trees. Arya, Davos, Arryn, and Gendry arrived upon Rhaegal's escort to rousing cheers. They recounted their journey beneath the heart tree. Sansa listened, face pale yet proud. When they described Niharia's ambition, Bran nodded slowly. "Balance cannot be owned," he told the gathered lords that evening, his voice echoing across the new amphitheater. "Whenever mankind tries to ride it like a horse, the beast bucks and breaks its rider, and sometimes the fence as well. We keep the fields by walking them, not claiming them." Lord Royce swayed, finally dipped his quill and signed. Snow arrived early that year, catching farmers in half-harvest. Yet with new solar glass greenhouses powered by temperate glows, offspring of Sam's balanced alloys, grain survived. Trade with Summer Isles flourished, Davos ferrying citrus north, wheat south. Gendry reforged his hammer with help from maester smiths, embedding a gem of Frostweir in the core to temper heat. It rang different now, deeper, reassuring. Arya continued to train Embersnow on high spirals around Frostweir's visible aura. Tourists in King's Landing often looked up at midday to marvel at twin dragons drawing lazy circles around the sun. Arryn spent long hours beneath heart trees and in citadel chapels, playing his fused flute rib. The music carried a new undertone, neither grim nor triumphant, simply steady, like surf meeting pebbles twice a breath. Children said snow melted slower when he played, and campfires burned gentler. As first spring buds opened, Bran dreamed of valleys where ember seeds once lay dormant. Now they slept beneath hardy roots, lulled by music and watchful eyes. He knew threats would return in other shapes. Ambition never truly dies, but each crisis had tightened the weave of alliances among dragons, wolves, and distant people once strangers. One evening, Bran sat with Sansa on the castle roof, watching green-blue lanterns flicker along courtiers' balcony vines. Below, a small stage bustled, where Tyrion prepared a comedy about stubborn trees and prouder men. Gendry hammered a rhythmic beat on an anvil drum. Arryn fluted harmony, and Arya danced along the parapet. Balance incarnate, blades spinning silver arcs that never once cut. Sansa sipped wine, eyes shimmering. The world still reels under our feet, brother. But tonight I feel it settling. Bran smiled, letting the night air play through his hair. It settles because we walk together. So long as every footstep listens for the tremor, no fault will take us by surprise. Thou. From far above, Rhaegal and Embersnow soared, their twin shadows merging across moonlit snow. Balance, never absolute, never still, rode those shadows, gliding where hot scales met ice-kissed wings, singing a song older than dragon or direwolf, and renewed with each measured breath of the world. Okay. One? A jade dawn crept over Winterfell's ramparts, staining the crenellation's pale green, as though an emerald sun rose beyond the wolf's wood instead of the familiar gold-white orb. Rosemary smoke from the kitchens curled across the yard, mixing with forge smog and the faint scent of late snow. Bran scarcely noticed the morning hues or the mingled smells, for his thoughts were already halfway to the other side of the world, riding weirwood roots like messenger pigeons, flitting along an invisible nerve net, drawing twitching reports from 1,000 eyes and ears and leaves. Rhaegal perched on the broken tower, wings folded, long tail draping down the moss-dark stones like a living banner. He was still for once, content to watch ravens swirl and children chase each other across the bailey. But Bran felt the old dragon's restlessness under the calm. Every subtle ripple in scales, every slight stir of the wedge-shaped head. There was always another tremor in the tapestry, another dark thread threatening to snag the weave. He blinked out of his waking trance when a clangor rose from the stairs. Arya pushed through the door with Embersnow's leather harness slung over her shoulders, cheeks flushed from sparring with Gendry. Snowflakes, fat and wet, clung to her dark hair despite the obvious exertion. She wiped sweat from her brow with a grin that suggested mischief or blood or both. "Morning, Your Grace," she teased him. She always said the title as though it were a joke they shared at everyone else's expense. "Is the world burning again, or do we have time for soup?" "Neither, and both," Bran answered. "Soups will boil regardless, and the world never quite stops burning, not since Valyria thought itself a god's kiln." Lovely mood. She trotted over and peered down at the yard. Sansa's court scribes shuffled into the new amphitheater with scrolls bigger than their torsos. Tyrion stood on a podium, addressing a gaggle of skeptical Myrish ambassadors, his gesturing dwarfing the snow-drifted benches. Arryn tuned his dragonglass flute near the stage, testing each note as if gauging wind direction by sound alone. Arya grimaced. "Do I need to feign interest in their endless quill chatter? I'd rather spar or nap." "Neither," Bran repeated, but his smile took the edge from the word. "I have something better for you. Flight." Her grin brightened. "Where to this time? More islands with funeral trees and half-dead zealots? Then thou." "I hope not. The shadow lands at the far edge of Essos." He said it gently, as if coaxing a skittish horse. Ashai and the dry rivers east of it. She blew out a slow whistle. "Beyond even the birth of day. Long way." "Why?" He told her of the vision that had haunted his night. A silhouette, tall as a tower, thin as bone, outlined against a violet-black horizon, while 2 moons danced overhead. At its feet writhed phosphorescent rivers, glowing red and white, converging in a delta that pulsed like the heart of the world. When the figure moved, its shadow stretched across oceans, slender arms bridging dawn and dusk. "Shadow binds to blood, blood to flame. Flame to frost," Bran muttered, recalling the whisper. Someone is twisting that litany in ash-eye. The weirwood roots taste ash in the wind. Arya's expression sobered. She looked at Rhaegal, perched above. Rhaegal can carry us. Bran shook his head. He must remain. His bond to me stabilizes the northeast. But Ember Snow has grown. She can cross continents now. You, Arryn, and Gendry together again, plus Davos to chart currents. You will need smuggler cunning in those harbors. And perhaps Samwell will send a maester of the multitudes with you. Someone fluent in shadow tongues. Menso. Arya tilted her head. Sam will insist on coming himself if you let him. Not with 2 small children underfoot at the Citadel's new nursery wing, Bran said. But he'll send his best. Maester Sara of Summer Isles, steel mind and kinder heart. Footsteps interrupted them. Gendry appeared, hair damp, a heavy leather apron over his tunic, hammerflecks blackening his cheek. Arya, your new crossguard is ready. Merged Valyrian steel edge and direwolf tooth core. Sharp enough to shave a spider. Nennerwanhan. Thank you. She took the dagger, tested balance, flashed a griddle luminous grin. Gendry turned to Bran and tried to hide the worry creasing his brow. I overheard something about the Shadowlands. Bran nodded. A tremor. Uncertain shape. You 2 leave tomorrow at dawn. Sansa will begrudge me, but she trusts the blade you carry. He eyed the hammer slung over Gendry's back. And the hammer that might break tomorrow's chains. Gendry scratched head. I'll beat more fittings for Embersnow's harness. She's bigger around the neck now. No. Arya thumped his arm and trotted toward Rhaegal's tail to fetch her practice cloak, leaving Bran alone again. He felt the dragon's gaze, and laid a hand on Rhaegal's scaly knee. Hold your court, old friend. Guard the sky. Rhaegal rumbled as if to say, always. Davos Seaworth paced the deck of the Snow Onion II, a sleeker version of the sloop he had lost in Saurian's Steam Gulf. Snow Onion II tarried latine sails stitched from voltine silk, light and strong and ironically dyed a blaze orange visible for leagues. Arya said that color would make them easy to track. Davos argued it would lure pirates eager for loot, and pirates were predictable. Maester Sara arrived at the docks that afternoon, wearing a copper mask shaped like a stylized owl, an emblem of her order within Sam's new multitudes. Beneath it her dark eyes glittered like polished hematite. She brought a strapped case of scrolls and a satchel of volcanic glass vials. Arryn greeted her shyly. She greeted him as colleague rather than pupil. Gendry hoisted finished harness pieces aboard. He'd inlaid each strap with frost-weir bark strips sewn inside the leather. Might calm Embersnow's nerve, he explained, and maybe sharpen her senses. He winked at Davos. And if not, at least it looks fancy. By twilight, Embersnow circled above the river mouth, wings scything the lavender sky. Arya tightened saddle knots and hopped to the deck rail. Tomorrow then, she said, voice softer than the wind. Straight east to the Sea of Storms. Then south along the Jade Gates, beyond Korth, hugging the Carcosa shore, into the Shadow's mouth. Probably no taverns on that leg. Nenabisuar. Davos spat overboard. And currents that eat whole fleets. But the bigger the chum, the bigger the catch. Arya rolled eyes. Spare me your nautical sermon. Queen Sansa's throne room crackled with tension that night. Candlelight shimmered on banners, direwolf sigils sewn into living silver cloth. Sansa stood beneath them, fingers drumming her armrest while Tyrion delivered yet another progress report. Wildling lumber cooperatives, Dornish sand roads, a new joint fleet with the Ironborn patrolling soft seas. She listened, but Bran's request echoed louder in her mind. When Tyrion paused to wet his lips, his cup contained chilled mulled cider now, no wine, she sighed. Tell the council I approve the trade fleet charter. She raised a hand to still his next sentence. Master Tyrion, have you seen Bran this eve? In the rookery, milady. Tyrion's mismatched eyes studied her delicate frown. Plotting ravens' courses, I imagine. Ace ever, she murmured. When the hall emptied, she visited Bran's high chamber. He was perched near the window, petals of weirwood blossoms drifting around him in unnatural breeze. "You're sending her again?" she said. He nodded once. "She'll become more myth than sister at this rate. Always in the sky, never at hearth." Sansa's voice cracked. Fatigue made it small. "She is the sky," Bran replied. "We cannot cage storm winds. She is best where the horizon beckons." Sansa wrapped arms around herself. "When will the horizon cease beckoning?" Bran's gaze softened. "When hearts cease being hearts, I suppose." He wheeled chair forward and took her hand. "Each venture heals something in her. She left Winterfell a wolf cub, came home a dancer, left again a shadow, came home a protector. Let her complete this arc." Sansa kissed the top of his head. "Bring her back. That's all." In pre-dawn hush, snow fell like feathers torn from cosmic pillows. Arya strapped herself into Ember Snow's saddle and gave Davos the final handshake. Maester Sara bowed. Gendry bumped knuckles. Arryn played a low note that made the frost cloak on rails shimmer. Bran observed from rampart. He lifted a gloved hand, not waving exactly, more blessing. Ember Snow thrust skyward, tow line snapping taut. Snow Onion II shot forward as the dragon's slipstream filled sails. They cleared the river mouth and headed west-southwest to catch a known warm current that curled around the arbor, then cut east across the summer sea, circumventing storms that frothed near the stepstones. Rhaegal drifted overhead briefly, escorting them past White Harbor before banking north. Bran closed his eyes and followed them at a distance until the weirwood lattice thinned beyond the shark's teeth. He released his hold, trusting Arya's instinct. The Jade Gates greeted them 8 days on. 2 colossal sandstone spires rising from turbid waters like leviathan teeth. Dense winds funneled between, swirling curtains of dust. Davos cursed the crosschop. Maester Sara hummed melodic numerals, charting swirl vectors. Ember Snow's wings thrummed as she fought turbulence. Arya embraced the sway, reading updrafts through hips and thighs. Beyond the gates, the pale jade ocean shimmered under sunless gray, a permanent twilight cast by rolling dry storms from the red waste. Ember Snow's scales took on a greenish luminescence, camouflaging against the sky. On the 12th day, sails slumped. Air grew still, stale. Davos recognized it. Shadow calm. They'd entered the onset of Ashai's environs. A permanent gloom hung above black water. The horizon glowed faint violet where oily rivers met the narrow sea. Ember Snow roosted on the mast, uneasy. They anchored near a small promontory, a crumbled lighthouse whose flame long extinguished. The coast smelled of stale incense and rotting kelp. Gendry scouted the beach and returned with a frown. No footprints, but stones look arranged. Deliberate spiral patterns and bone shards piled in each ring. Arya crouched to touch a bone, recognizing human femur cut in equal segments. "Markers," Sara said quietly. "Legend says Ashaians leave offerings for shadows to feed, so shadows do not feed on living folk." "Pleasant," Gendry muttered. That night on deck, Arryn played a soft lullaby. From shore, pale shapes flickered and retreated. Ember Snow hissed but did not flame. The flute notes coiled through gloom, weaving protective hush. In pre-dawn gloom, the sea rippled beside the hull without wind. A barge coalesced out of shadow, black hull carved from a single obsidian slab. Lanterns containing ghost fire, not green like wildfire, nor blue like frostweir, but pearlescent white, glowed at its prow. Rowers wore black gauze over faces. A woman at the helm raised a hand, gloved fingers ending in silver claws. "My Lady of Wolves and Glass," she called in flawless common. "Ashai extends parley." Arya stepped to rail. "On whose authority?" "The Veiled Council and her splendid knight, Sindra Cath. You approach the mouth of Black Rivers. Entrance requires escort." "Menshanda." Gendry gripped hammer. Davos lowered a plank. Arya jumped to the barge. They glided towards city walls like melted candle wax. Ashai by the shadow towered black under no moon, because the moon here, according to legend, never shone directly over its eaves, but hovered as a thin sickle behind a permanent curtain of dusk. Streets ran dead straight, lined by basalt dragons hammered into lampposts that glowed with ghost fire. At the city's heart stood the Palace of Morning Stars. And inside its courtyard, beneath a lattice of iron filigree, was another impossible tree. This one was still small, sapling high, but unmistakably frost-wear kin. Bark shimmered frosted gold, leaves black glass veined white. Arya's stomach sank. Sindra Cath met them there. Tall woman draped in midnight silks threaded with meteor dust, eyes hidden behind half-mask of polished jade. She gestured to seats carved from pale stone. You come to uproot what you do not understand, she began, voice both weary and sharp. We call it the Morn Weir. It is not blight but cure. Betting. Maester Sara stepped forward. Every forced hybrid born thus far has threatened cataclysm. What is your cure? Look around. Sindra swept an arm. Beyond courtyard, children chased each other. Merchants hawked shadow silk. Street musicians played bone flutes. Yet no lantern burned real fire, no hearth smoke. Ashai's lifeblood is shadow and light. Each year we fade, color leaching from skin. Spirit. Memory. The Mornweir drinks that leaching and exhales hue. Since its planting, children are born not gray, but brown, gold, red. We save ourselves. Now. Arya studied the tree. Its leaves pulsed with silent midnight color. But deeper she felt wrong hum, like a harp strung with spiderweb. What did you feed it? Dream fire. Sindra said, unashamed. Distillations from dragon eggs found petrified beyond the dry road. Fragments of cold iron taken from the breast of a fallen White Walker. And singing blood drawn willingly from one of your own kin. Arya's hand tightened on hilt. Which kin? Sindra signaled her servants. They wheeled forward a small figure bound to a chair. A child, maybe 10, with hair like snow and eyes mismatched. One blue, one brown. It was Aren's younger sister Alice. Spirited away from Old Town months prior by unknown raiders. Aren cried out, rushing to her. But shadows grasped his ankles, freezing him mid-stride. She volunteered, Sindra whispered. Children of mixed blood hear both songs. She came to us in dream, seeking to end the tug-of-war between flame and frost. Arya's mind howled. She felt Bran's lodestone burn so hot it might brand her. She clenched teeth. We will take her home. Sindra's jade mask tilted. Then the Mornweir fails, and our city fades. There must be balance, one child for thousands. Sara advanced, voice trembling yet firm. Balance is not achieved by choosing victims. It is achieved by choosing community. Release her. Sindra considered. If you bring us a dragon egg to replace her blood, untainted but alive, we will trade. There is one rumored beneath Storm Dragon Hill near Korth. It was offered by a red woman 30 years ago, then stolen. Find it within a lunar cycle, we barter. Gendry hissed, hammer half raised. Arya touched his arm. We can't storm this place. Shadow sorcery would kill Alis first. We must enact trade. Davos nodded glumly. The Sultan of Karth collects rumors of dragon eggs like lesser men collect lovers. Maybe he has it. Aren knelt before Alis, kissed her bound hands, promised return. She spoke no word, eyes dim yet trusting. Sindra waved. Shadows receded. They left the city escorted. Embersnow chirped unease at the trees' smell, but allowed Arya onto saddle. Davos set sails for Karth. Back in Winterfell, Bran convulsed when Arya's message reached through Frostweir's network. He tasted Alice's blood in the sap of Mornweir. Sansa steadied him as he gasped. Karth, he croaked. Dragon egg for child. Tyrion paced. Dragon eggs aren't carrots at market, and Karth loves ransom games. Bran thought. Beyond the narrow sea, Daenerys' lost clutches still rumored. One, a mottled silver-black egg said to be cursed, had resurfaced in Karth's bazaars decades earlier before vanishing again. He had glimpsed it once in dragon dreams, a shell leaching heat, yearning for storm. He called a raven moot, dispatched messengers to Yunkai merchants, to Dothraki horse lord turned sea raider along Slaver's Bay, to maesters in Volantis Red Temple. Somewhere the egg waited. Rhaegal growled. He desired to fly, but Bran anchored him. Instead, Bran warged into a swift gull and soared along the southern coastline of Essos, scanning harbors. Days passed. At last he glimpsed a familiar shimmer, a glassy orb resting on a velvet cushion inside a pearl-decked barge moored outside Korth's water gardens. The barge belonged to Vastrax Moistina, the incense emperor, a trade magnate selling illusions spun from smoke. Bran saw the egg exchanged to a masked priestess of the Red Temple for a cask of Shadowbinder tears. Arya and crew arrived next day, docking among spice junks. Gendry disguised, Maester Sara in tow. They traced rumors to the temple, but found only empty altars. Davos bribed harbor scribes, learned the barge sailed north overnight into the hidden lagoon behind Korth's glass pyramid. They infiltrated via canal, Arya swimming eel silent, dagger between teeth. She surfaced inside lagoon. Silver moonlight rippled over dozens of stone leopards. The barge glowed faint. Inside cabin, Arya slid past saffron curtains and found the egg, large as a man's torso, shell-patterned like storm clouds and lightning bolts. She reached to lift it. The egg throbbed, warm then cold, sending memory of scream into her bones. She wrestled it into rucksack, snuck out. Outside, Vastrax himself confronted her, staff of incense smoke swirling illusions of monstrous snakes. Gendry leapt from canal walkway swinging hammer. Davos sniped with crossbow. Maester Sara cast frost-sung rune that solidified incense illusions into brittle glass which shattered. They escaped, but not cleanly. City guards pursued. Embersnow swooped. Arya strapped egg in netting beneath dragon's belly. They soared, sails following. A sandstorm swallowed them near Jade Straits. Lightning flickered. Egg vibrated, soaking heat from Embersnow's core. Dragon wheezed. Arryn sensed internal hum. Egg is waking. They needed to damp it or dragon risked burnout. Gendry took hammer. Arya placed egg on lowered cargo net. Maester Sara recited Frostweir lullaby. Arryn played flute. Slowly egg cooled, but hairline cracks appeared. They reached Ashai's outskirts within the lunar cycle. Sindra met them, mask now white. They presented the egg. She presented Ollys, unbound but pale. Trade sealed. Yet, as exchange occurred, egg cracked open. Too soon. From shell spilled neither hatchling nor yolk, but a swarm of ember-bright moths. They swirled skyward like sparks, then dived toward Mornweir sapling. Leaves caught fire and ice simultaneously. A shriek rippled through courtyard. Sindra screamed triumph, but triumph faltered. The tree's trunk split under conflicting forces. Roots liquefied into molten slag. Shadows across city walls convulsed, as though cut from their owners. Merchants fled. Arya shoved Alice to Gendry. Embersnow exhaled white-hot flame. Arryn unleashed frost note. The twin forces pinned Moth. Swarm midair. Bran, remote from Winterfell, funneled Weirwood strength through Frostweir network to Arryn's flute, amplifying his note into thunder. Moths imploded, coalesced into one bright star that shot upward through palace roof, rending iron lattice. It soared east, not west, toward a dawn yet unborn. Sindra collapsed, mask cracked. You break both gifts, she rasped. Ashai falls again to gray. Maester Sara knelt by her. You asked for balance and got greed. Plant seeds, not snares. They fled city as lights dimmed. A morning after found Ashai's sky no longer violet but pallid, rain drizzled, and children came out with color in cheeks still. The city had lost glamour but regained sky. When the party returned to Winterfell months later, Frost retreated from meadows. Aes walked between Arryn and Arya, tiny flute around her neck. Frostweir leaves on Aegon's hill chimed as they passed, acknowledging new thread. Bran greeted them at gate, tears glistening. Sansa knelt to hug Allies, offering honeycakes and hushed apologies. Tyrion produced parchment charter, renouncing blood tithes in all 9 kingdoms. Arya sat on parapet that night, legs dangling. Gendry joined, clanked mug to hers. "Will it ever end?" he asked. "When wolves stop running, when hammers stop ringing," she replied. "So no." They laughed quietly. Below, children of all houses danced around frost-weir saplings transplanted safely across keep. One in Godswood, one near Forge. Rhaegal circled overhead with ember snow and newly hatched night ember, the dragon moth's essence reborn as small drakelings, black and silver. Bran watched them and smiled. The horizon still beckoned, but each journey returned richer tapestry. Scars knit to stars, wolves to dragons, frost to flame, an endless story of breath and ash and snow and dawn.